Hello, folks. Welcome to episode 11 of the Horror Screams podcast. Horror Screams is an extension of the Horror Screams Video Vault website. I'm your host this evening, Stephen. Your regular host, Pete, is having a well-deserved break. So it's just me, and our co-host today is Sarah. Good afternoon, Sarah.
Hello there.
How's it going?
It's all good. It's all good. I'm really looking forward to this episode.
Yes, yeah, we have a special episode today. Not like every other episode isn't special, of course. It's going to be an episode with a certain Bruce Campbellian bias because we're going to be talking about the Evil Dead franchise as a whole and maybe some extras as well as our retro rewind. And then we're going to be effortlessly segueing into a whole bit about old Bruce. And it turns out we happen to have the unofficial #1 fan of Bruce Campbell here. Hello, Sarah.
That would be me. Yes.
Is there like a league table of like top fans? Does he have like a chart and you're on it? How does it work? How do you know if you're
Oh,
the number
yeah.
one fan, like in Misery? How do you know?
Oh, that is a good question. But I'm pretty sure he knows by the
Yeah.
constant emails and pictures and, everything that I send him all the time. We're good
Socks.
mates. Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Definitely socks. Nothing else.
Yeah, I suppose when I was a massive nerdy geek fan of X-Files, I used to think, oh, I must be a big fan because it's the first, and I was like 15 at the time, I suppose, because it was the 90s. It's the first thing I think about when I wake up, and it's the last thing I'm like, oh my God. So Bruce, I kind of get it. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
go
so
through.
that's going to be an exciting episode with all that going on. As is tradition, we're going to start with recently seen. So I'll kick this off. It's been an interesting month. Obviously, we're still in the grip of one thing and another virus type stuff. But cinemas are kind of reopening, which is good.
Mhm.
And there is a sense of things are becoming a bit more normal. And on that note, actually, something that is horror related as far as I'm concerned, today I actually went to the cinema and I saw Jurassic Park.
Yay! Amazing. That's a brilliant thing to see at the cinema, isn't it? How many times have you seen it?
Well, that's the interesting thing, actually. I never saw it at the cinema on
What?
its run. So it came out in '93. I don't think I was going to the cinema that much then. My parents were, I guess, because the nearest one to us, it would have been Kings Lynn, so it wasn't that far away. But we didn't go massively as a family. But as soon as I was like getting money and I was kind of just able to take myself off, I was going to the cinema of my own volition. But that probably wasn't until like the year after Jurassic Park. So I never saw it at the cinema. Shocking.
Oh, so
Um,
this one was the first time that you've seen it at the cinema.
Yeah, weirdly, yeah, and
Wow.
weirdly as well, I've seen every Jurassic Park film since at the cinema,
Yeah,
which is a bit of a shame because this really is the best one, as much as I like the other ones.
absolutely.
Yeah, and it really holds up. I think it
Mm.
is like one of the great examples of where they're using a combination of animatronics and CGI, and the dinosaurs feel real as a result. You know
Mm.
that massive T-Rex head was built, and it's right there, and it's
Hmm.
snapping at their faces. And there's a whole section which maybe I appreciate it. I think watching it today, I remembered more than ever before how funny Jeff Goldblum is in it. And he is hilarious. He's just sarcastic.
Mm.
He's breezing through it. He's got his shirt open for no real apparent reason for a whole section of the film. Um,
Yep.
how funny Sam Neill is, who's always great as well, as
Yep.
the kid hating doctor or archaeologist, and how scary that whole midsection is from the great scene with the car and the
Yep.
T Rex and the water glass. And there's a whole section
Yeah.
that's really intense, starting with that because there's a long build up, which is great,
Hmm.
but when it gets going, it really gets going and never lets up.
Yep.
Uh,
That is great. That bit and the bit where the guy gets eaten off the outhouse, off the toilet.
yes,
That's a brilliant thing to see in the cinema on a massive screen.
it's great actually. Yeah, one of my favorite things in life generally was I think I showed this on DVD to my daughter when she was about 3 or 4, I think, possibly slightly younger because I know we saw Jurassic World when she was 4, I think, in the cinema, which was great. But my favorite thing about watching Jurassic Park for the first time with her when she was really small was that she actually laughed at the toilet eating scene.
Yeah.
So she kind of got the joke at the age of 3 that it's funny to see a lawyer being eaten on the toilet by a monster.
Yeah.
So yeah, it holds up really well. The cinemas around here and I guess around the UK and probably other countries as well. In the absence of major new releases until Tenet, they're showing retro stuff like Empire Strikes Back. There's a few horror movies that have kind of snuck out, but this is one of the retro choices that I thought was a can't miss opportunity. So yeah, that was my first one. Recently seen, Sarah?
Recently seen for me. Okay, I'm going to go with an older one as well, but one that I hadn't seen before. I'm guessing it's kind of come about because of the release of the Blackwater Abyss, the second Blackwater movie.
Yeah.
But the one that I watched was The Reef, which I think
Yes.
came out. Did it come out after the first Blackwater or about the same kind of time, 2010?
Yeah, about the same time, I think.
Mm.
Around
But
that time.
but that one had passed me by, so I was just kind of flicking through. I think it was on Amazon Prime and saw that. I was like, okay, I'm going to give that one a go. And to start off with, I wasn't all that impressed with it. I thought it was a bit slow to start and stuff.
Yep.
But it's another one of those just creeping shark movies that just slowly builds up, and by the end of it, you're just an absolute mess.
Yep.
And I love ones like that. You know, you don't even see a shark for at least a good 40, 50 minutes, I don't think. But the dread is there, the suspense is there. You know, something is lurking under the water, and, you know, you have a choice to stay on a sinking boat or swim for miles, not knowing where land is in shark infested
Yeah.
waters. You know, it's proper scary. I really enjoyed that one. That was a good one.
It's really good, isn't it? Yeah, I like that too. And it led to things like amidst all of the kind of more cartoonish shark movies, it led to things like 47 meters down, which I really liked. I really, really
Love
liked actually.
those. Yeah, that one,
um,
and the second one, the Uncaged one as well. Jesus Christ, that gave me heart palpitations.
it's brilliant. Yeah, both of those really took me by surprise, especially the first one when I was kind of half expecting it to be just another one of those. Like, here we go again. But as soon as they're in the cage, man,
So
it's sweat
claustrophobic, and
inducing.
yeah,
Yeah. And
absolutely.
like you said, really good use of actually a fairly decent looking shark effect. But they didn't
Or in
overuse
the
it,
Reef.
especially in the yeah, in the Reef and in
Yeah,
I thought in 47 as well.
they actually use real sharks in the Reef. It's all like proper shark footage, I believe, because you never actually
That's right.
see anyone specifically. You know, the shark drags people underwater, or so you think, but you never actually see the shark come up and grab them.
Yeah,
So
it's
I'm
been
pretty sure they
cleverly
actually,
cut
yeah,
together. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
I think you're right. I'd forgotten that actually. There's a few that do it like that. I know there was no like kind of physical shark in open water was a really tense
Mm,
one that I liked,
mm-hmm,
where it's all about the suggestion really of what's
mm.
underneath you than really seeing an occasional cutaway to what lies beneath. But yeah, that's great. Yeah, and Blackwater Abyss, I'm looking forward to because I really like
Mm.
Blackwater too.
Yeah, that
Um,
was a good one.
yeah, there's some good ones. It is nice actually because the Mad Shark movies, Sharktopus and all those are good fun, of course,
Oh, they're
and there's a
brilliant.
lot of them, so
Yeah,
so yeah, select wisely, I suppose. But it's nice to see one that's back to basics and tries to be scary, and
yeah,
that's
and
probably tougher to
succeeds.
do. Yeah, yeah, it's great. So that's cool. Something I've seen on a totally different note, I suppose, although fits into the ecological kind of vibe, I guess, is a British film called Little Joe, um,
Hmm.
which is available. It's through Amazon, but I think you have to subscribe to the BFI channel or pay, I don't know, 1.99 or something. It's not terribly expensive, but it's really good. And it's really unusual, and it possibly could do your head in, to give it the technical term. But when I had an interview with the director, and I've forgotten her last name, I think she's called Jessica, but I've forgotten her last name, which is shameful, but she's really talented. Um, she pointed out that the soundtrack is meant to be really annoying. So you do have this soundtrack
Okay.
of high pitched sounds, and because it's representing a plant, basically, a bunch of people have genetically engineered a plant designed to make people happy. It emanates vibes that create happiness and potentially will be a big factor in helping mental illness and things like that. And obviously, that things are going to go quite wrong, and soon people that are working with the plants very closely to the plants, although they're wearing face masks, which is an interesting element for a movie release this year,
Uh-huh.
um, they are becoming affected by it in a sort of, but not quite, invasion of the body snatchers kind of way. Um, and you think you know where it's going to go, but it never really goes there, and it never really commits to being a full out full-blown horror movie either, but the sense of dread and the soundtrack, which is almost feels like the plant's a constant presence because all the use of sound design and sound effects is really kind of disturbing. Yeah, it's another one that for me, because I like the films that are coming out, especially this year, that are all about dread rather than massive payoff of scares and shocks.
Mm.
And Little Joe, really well acted. It's got the guy that does the voice of Paddington Bear, Ben Whishaw. I
Oh,
almost
right.
forgot his name too. And he's really good. But like everybody in the film, there's something a bit off about him. Um, so there's kind of likable characters, but everybody's a little not quite right, and you're on edge from the very beginning. It's a great idea. It's beautifully coloured. It's great looking plant as well. But if you're looking for something a bit different that fits in the line of horror films about homicidal plants, then this is an interesting one, which probably deserves to be better known than it was. I think it got a theatrical release sort of around the time the lockdown was beginning in the UK, so it was a bit unlucky. But yeah,
Oh.
Little Joe.
Yeah, I want to check it out, but I can't shake the whole Little Shop of Horrors vibe I kind
Wait,
of getting.
yeah,
Yeah,
it does.
please tell me it talks. Does it talk?
No, it doesn't. Oh, actually, oh
Oh,
no, I was about to. Oh, no, to give anything away about what the plant does would spoil it at a key
oh,
moment. But
okay.
um, it doesn't go there. But like you said, you think it might, and you oh crap, well, it might spoil it if it
Okay.
goes there. Um, uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it is conscious, and the look of the thing as well. You will think of Audrey too, but in a way. But it is kind of self-conscious about all those things and Day of the Triffids and all those kind
Mm.
of weird plants in movies before. So it's playing with that stuff, but it's doing so in a really creepy way. I still think about it. Actually, it gave me the willies. Actually, this one,
Mm.
but not in the willy fashion that one of the movies we'll talk about in a moment did. A different kind of
Okay.
willy.
Different kind of Willy.
Yes,
Okay,
many.
cool. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Any more recently seen something?
Oh yeah, for me. So I've been a bit light on the whole zombie movie watching this
Ah,
month, but I did watch something slightly that could be considered kind of zombie. So it was one that you and Pete had both told me about, called The Dark
hmm.
from 2018. You guys watched it at Fright Fest, I believe,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's about a young girl who gets killed by her mum's boyfriend in a very nasty way. And she comes back as a kind of zombie, and she's living in the woods in her old house, and people are going missing, and there's stories of monsters and stuff in the woods. And a guy escapes from the police to the house in the woods, and in the back of this car, he has a young boy who is completely blind, and the girl gets rid of the guy, and then it's just her and this young boy, and they both have had similar horrendous experiences, and they kind of like live together in this little house trying to help each other out and kind of just make it through. And it's really quite traumatic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's powerful. Yeah. It's one of those small scale kind of character driven horror movies that just happens to be about zombies and yeah, yeah, I really liked it.
In a fashion, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
annoyingly, she's not a zombie as you would I would hope she would be,
technically.
but
Yeah.
you know, for it to be like that, it would have gone a completely different way that it did. So they made the right decision to do it the way that they did, I think. But it does remind me a lot of Let the Right One In and that kind of a thing.
Yes. Yeah, which is such a great that's one of the greatest, isn't it? Let the Right One In. Um
Yeah.
yeah, it's a strange one, The Dark. I need to rewatch it. It was one of those ones where um watching it, I think in this case we saw it on the last day of Fright Fest. It's Fright Fest in the UK, if you're not aware, is like a 5 day festival usually in August, um, and it is wall to wall movies. If you choose to play the festival that way, you can go and see 5 or 6 movies a day, and have almost enough time for the toilet and eating something, and a bit of sleep. Not all at the same time, obviously. And when you get to day 5, you know, the programming isn't always. I mean, it must be a nightmare to program that festival. But the programming, sometimes you think, "Oh, really? You've saved a slow, somber movie for day 5 when everybody needs something to wake them up." You know.
Yeah, yeah.
Same for the midnight movies. You know, sometimes they'll pick something like, what was it, Zombievers. So that's the perfect midnight film. People are
Yeah.
somewhat sloshed. But they have in the past as well put something really slow and subtitled and 2.5 hours long on at 11:30. Hang on a minute. So The Dark fell victim to that. I'm a little bit too weary to truly appreciate this syndrome of the festival going thing, and I think possibly Pete felt the same way. So, but I was very much aware of the good things about it. So I think I just need to go and watch it more awake and more attuned to its kind of style, which was, I mean, it was well reviewed. So yeah, it's a good one.
It's a good one. Very emotional.
Yeah, and I think there's an uptick in horror films like that. I can't think of any massive examples right now, but there seems to be more. Even the one I kept harping on about in the zombie episode, It Stains the Sands Red.
Yeah.
He's like that too. It's very much character driven. It's unusually emotional for a genre that isn't seen to be about that kind of stuff, but often has been. So I think we might see more of that kind of small scale horror coming out.
That's a good thing.
And The Dark is on Shudder, is that right?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Excellent. Well, Shudder. On that note, Shudder has been kicking out a lot of really good things lately, and the biggest or most high-profile one of late is Host, which we both have seen,
Yes.
and which debuted this month. And I think I watched it on the first night it was out because it was being hyped quite a lot, and I really liked it. I thought this truly deserved its really impressive reception that it's had. It's really frightening. It's a great concept, and I think it will stand as like an important film for the times in which we're living. And I'm sure there'll be others too. But a film like this, shot in lockdown, about being in lockdown, in which characters make jokes about not being allowed to cough, and they have to wear a mask when they head out, and they're making jokes about lockdown haircuts, all that kind of stuff. And the premise is awesome. The premise reminded me a lot of Ghostwatch, which was the scariest thing I ever saw growing up on BBC TV.
Yeah.
And
The
even
whole
if I
bit with
watch
the
it now,
seance and stuff is
yes.
that's when you start getting sucked in. To start off with, you're a bit blasé about it, and you're like, oh my god, these guys are they're a little bit like idiots. Stop messing about, and then the whole seance things happen, and
Yes.
the girl gets pushed back into the wall on a chair, and you're just like, oh wow, okay, this has just happened.
Good God.
Things are getting serious.
Yeah, absolutely. It builds it really well, and it does a really cool thing like that reminded me of Ghostwatch as well, where it pulls the rug out from under your eyes. That's not quite right. That phrase with the rug.
Yeah.
It does that. It does that really well, at least twice. It does it with a bit of footage which initially is really innocuous, but later turns out to be a kind of oh no moment of oh I get it. That's why that was set up earlier in the film, and it does
Is that
it
the
with
candle blowing out?
yeah, that as well. Oh yeah, there's a few like that, isn't it? And the whole concept of a séance shared, in this case through a Zoom chat, but in Ghostwatch it was a séance that was created through the medium of television, of everybody watching this live broadcast and it entering your homes effectively, unleashing a demon, a demonic spirit. It's got some really good scares. It's a really great use of the technology. So in 20 years' time, I think the things that will date it will be the things that will be really interesting about it, which is kind of the thing with Ghostwatch. It was made in the early 90s. It was the early days of video walls and shows like Crime Watch, which is why it's called Ghostwatch, I guess. So I think this will be just as interesting to watch in the future. And I think just as a scary movie, it worked really well.
And it's under just about an hour long, isn't it, as well? So, things happen really quickly.
Yeah.
There's
And a
no
great
messing
choice.
about. Yeah.
I think that kind of format, it can be overstretched. I actually quite like the Unfriended movies, which this reminded me of.
Yeah.
And there's a really creepy film called The Collingswood Story from about 17 years ago, which I think was the first to be a horror movie entirely based around a Skype call in that case, which is also an hour and a half, and they do feel slightly overstretched. So I think a premise like this fits that format really well. There's no reason a feature film has to be an hour and a half, and in fact, like the 1930s horror movies, loads of those were just an hour long. Frankenstein, I think, is just over an hour. So it was a smart choice to not overstretch it and risk people getting a bit kind of twitchy and losing interest. But for top-notch scares, Host was superb actually.
Yeah.
Cracking.
Yeah. Sticking with Shudder then.
Yes.
Another one that is also on there that I said earlier, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it, but I'm going to go with Impetigo, which is an Indonesian curse movie. about a girl who visits her childhood village, discovering that a curse has been placed on it, and the children are all born without skin, and she has to figure out exactly how to stop this curse and get people having their kids again. And it starts off kind of with slight misdirection as well. It kind of starts off as a kind of haunted house type thing, but it never actually goes quite that far. You then have villagers like popping in and things start going very weird outside of the house and stuff. It's all quite tense. The beginning bit when she gets stalked to start off with, at the beginning from a villager. She just thinks there's a creepy guy following her around, but he literally just tries to kill her straight away. So it all happens quite quickly. And yeah, that was a really good one. It was kind of hard to follow. That was my only problem with that, is that the subtitles do run very, very quickly. So you've got to be quite a fast reader. But that's one to check out for sure.
Cool. There's a few, they seem to be cranking them out in Indonesia. There's a few Indonesian horror films on Netflix, which is a great platform for them. They'd probably otherwise be lost in the shuffle of movies. But there's one called Satan's Slaves, which is really scary. And there's a few others that look a bit like Indonesian versions of popular American films. Like there's one called The Doll that looks a bit Annabelle-ish, but I haven't watched it. But I think it's probably quite good. They do seem to be making some interesting, scary films. I think there's one called The Third Eye. But yeah, Impetigo, I'll give that a look. I like the sound of that, actually. And we're not sponsored by Shudder, but there is one more Shudder thing I wanted to mention. Not affiliated in any way with Shudder. Please do join Shudder. Which is a documentary, a very long documentary that's almost as long as the decade that it's about, which is In Search of Darkness.
Yes.
Which is a 4-ish hour documentary about horror in the 1980s. And it has its moments. I was slightly irked by this. I enjoyed so much of it, but I was slightly irked by certain things about it, some of which are just me being a bit anal. But it kind of goes through the decade, year by year mostly. It splits off to focus on trends, like kind of little sidebars about women in horror in the 80s and political horror, sex in 80s horror and things like that. But chiefly it's going through each year. It's picking out significant horror films from each year in turn. Although one problem with it is that the films it selects are typically ones that the people they've rounded up to commentate on them are involved in. So you end up...
Lots of Tom Atkins, rather.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So they obviously got him, which is great. But what it also means is you end up that out of all the horror films that were really good in the 80s, you end up with a piece on Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, just because they got hold of Elvira to talk on camera. So, I was a bit annoyed that, although it's called, it's about iconic 80s horror, I think is the subtitle, it's pretty much just American horror films. There's brief mention of a couple of films that may have come out from outside of America in the 80s, like Lair of the White Worm and Company of Wolves, but there's no look at things like Argento or Fulci. So it's a very kind of narrow focus. I did find a couple of the commentators a bit annoying, it has to be said, and I also got probably irrationally annoyed by two different people pronouncing Lance Henriksen's name as Lance Hendrickson. But that maybe says more about me than anything else. What do you think of it, Sarah?
I do agree with a lot of that. But for me, not being quite as knowledgeable on some of the movies as you are, I found that they did cover, or they touched on, a few movies that I'd heard of but didn't know a lot about. So cool. I now know slightly more about them, which I enjoyed. But they did kind of bang on a lot about Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
Because obviously the 80s was the year where they were just bashing them out. So that just appeared in every decade they were talking about. But I enjoyed the bit that they did on the final girls and the final guys. They'd said nothing about who we're going to talk about on this episode, like Bruce Campbell. They hadn't really mentioned a lot about Evil Dead either until they get to like the final girls, final guys bit, which I thought was a really good piece on Bruce.
Yes, that was nice. It's a shame they couldn't get him, isn't it? To join it, because they did get quite a good lineup. I mean, they had a few there, didn't they? Joe Dante was there, and quite sad to see because they've since died. But Stuart Gordon and Larry Cohen, who it has to be said didn't look too well.
No, he didn't look well, but he is he was on form, wasn't he? He is crazy.
Terrific. Yeah,
When
yeah,
he was
really great to listen to.
he was talking about Q the Winged Serpent and stuff, how he basically just shot it all and then sent it to the people and they went, oh yeah, you weren't supposed to do that. And he's like, oh well, I've done it. Put the
Yes.
monster in. There you go. That'll do. Bosh.
It's
I was like,
absolutely
that's
brilliant.
hilarious.
Oh, you need to watch. Have you watched King Cohen, the documentary all about his films?
No,
He's hilarious. I mean, that's basically that segment, but it turned
that
up
is
to
him.
11. That's 2 hours of him going through his entire thing. Oh yeah, and then they didn't give me the money, so I just went and did it myself, and I didn't give a shit. It's
Yeah.
and he's
I love
fantastic.
him. He was
He's
great.
great, and it's a fabulous film, Q. Yeah, so there is. I mean, the best thing for me about it, like you said, that it's actually it's probably just me being a bit of a snob, but it's actually really good, especially if you weren't around in the 80s or if you didn't catch up on all these films at the time. It's a
Yeah,
good intro.
there's a lot missing
Yeah.
for me.
Yes.
And, after watching that, I now know a lot more. And I've now got a massive long list. Oh my God, I really need to watch that. I need to watch that. I need to
Well,
watch
that's
that.
great, and that's
Yeah.
what these things are for. And this kind of thing was exactly what I used to do. The same thing when I was kind of gradually getting through the video shops in our town and stuff. You'd think, oh, I never heard of that one. You jot it down.
Mm.
We had a few documentaries like that in the 80s. It was really well put together, and I think, like with a lot of these things, the best bit is just seeing all the juicy bits of all the juicy clips from your favorite movies of the
Yeah.
80s put together in these really slick montages. Oh, there's the exploding head from Scanners.
Mm.
Fantastic. You never get bored of seeing things like that. Um, so I think it will do really well. That's In Search of Darkness. They are doing, I think the same people are doing the equivalent documentary on 80s sci-fi, I think. So that's coming as well, possibly through Shudder. I'm not sure, but we shall see. There was one more I think I was going to mention on the recently seen, which is a movie called The Fanatic,
Oh, yes. Tell us all
which
about that.
which is years, which is also available not through Shudder for a change, but through I don't know, through Sky, I think, in the UK, and probably through every cheap streaming or free streaming site in the US. The Fanatic is a movie directed by Fred Durst, who we all remember as being the charismatic frontman of Limp Bizkit from 1,100 years ago, and those great lyrics that have never
Oh,
died.
classics. Mm-mm.
Um,
Chocolate Starfish.
yeah. That's one of the
So
greats.
cool.
Keep rolling. I did it all for the Nookie, wasn't it? I did it all for
That's
the
the one, yeah.
yeah
They
cookie.
played at Reading one year when I was there. And
Wow.
I just went to go and catch a couple of songs just so I could say that I had. And the riot nearly started, I think, if I remember rightly. Nearly got trampled. Thanks, Limp Bizkit and Fred Durst.
God damn you. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Fred. Well, now you've got something more to thank Fred Durst for, because
Yeah.
he not only did he direct and produce this film, but he also co-wrote it, I believe. And there's a slightly awkward scene in it. I should tell you that the plot is basically Devon Sawa, who was the young lad from Final Destination, and doesn't look much older, even though that was 20 years ago, I think. He's you've got to the first bit of credibility you've got to swallow is that Devon Sawa is a massively successful movie star in this, and he makes horror films, especially, and action films. And John Travolta's character is obsessed with him, and John Travolta's character is autistic, which means for the purpose of the film, he's got a bad haircut and shuffles around, looking awkward. Um, and he's also a massive horror fan. He wears horror t-shirts. And the film does a clever thing, really. Somehow it manages to be really offensive to autistic people and also to horror fans, because it portrays both as, shuffling idiots, shuffling ridiculously overacted by John Travolta. But I don't quite see how he could have done it any other way, because the script is not the best.
Mm.
So he becomes obsessed with him. And there is a moment where Devon Sawa has a conversation with his son where they basically talk about, or he tells his son how great Limp Bizkit were. So
Oh
like,
my
oh, it's
God, of
that
course.
movie. Hey
Yeah, that
son,
has to
did I
be
ever
put
tell
in
you
there.
about Limp Bizkit?
How great they were. Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's a very odd film. I mean, Travolta is probably awful. It's hard to tell really, because what he's being asked to do is really dubious. I mean, part of his character is that he dresses up as a Cockney copper on the streets of Sunset Boulevard or Hollywood, wherever it is. So you've got Travolta playing this autistic guy who in turn is doing an impersonation badly of a London Bobby. That's really skin crawling. And the whole thing is just a bit uncomfortable, not in the way they probably intended. It's certainly a very kind of poor and again quite offensive portrait of mental illness. But then again, if it's just meant to be a kind of cheap schlocky film, it's probably not intended to be like a full-on serious study of it. So I guess we shouldn't be too hard on it. But it's going to go down in history, I think, as one of those big star movies which is pretty awful but kind of compelling to watch. So it's probably recommended if you kind of go in the spirit of knowing it's not very good, and if you can get past the fact that it's by Fred Durst, who we never
Yeah.
forgave for that awful cover version of the Who song, Behind Blue Eyes. Absolutely god awful. Never forgave him for that. Still sending
Right.
hate mail.
Yep. Well, now we know what he's been up to after all these years. Thinking
Yeah,
that they completely disappeared, he's off writing movies as well now. Is that his first one? Has he done any others?
I
And
don't know.
will he have more?
Well, it's the thing. I mean, I don't think he's directed before. I think he's popped up. Like, I'm pretty sure he pops up as like a bartender in that movie Gothica with Halle Berry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's that one he pops up
Mm.
in. Um, so he's obviously been trying to get into the business.
Mm.
It's just a really strange watch, and it doesn't even really deliver. I mean, there's a couple of moments of kind of gory gore, um, but it doesn't really, because it wants you to sympathise with Travolta to an almost kind of embarrassing sentimental degree. It doesn't ever go full tilt psycho the way you think it's going to go. You think, oh, it's going to end in a massacre, and actually something different happens, and you're like, oh right, so what was the point? um, yeah. So if you want to see a good film about an obsessive fan, go and watch something like The Fan with Michael Biehn from 1980-ish, where he's obsessed with Lauren Bacall, and that's a really good film, underrated. But if you want a dodgy one, then The Fanatic is out there for you.
I am actually strangely intrigued about this. I'm going to have to watch it now.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you about it. Yeah, because I don't think I know anybody that's watched it. It had awful reviews, and I kind of get that because it isn't very good, but it's also weirdly watchable and
Yeah, it's something you
slightly
just have to
self-like.
watch.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a 9.6 on the skin crawling-ometer, which is an
Oh.
invention I've created.
Okay.
Um, any other recently seen, Sarah?
Oh, well, I will do one final one, which
Yeah,
is also another documentary, which again was on Shudder, I believe. But it is Smoke and Mirrors, the story of Tom Savini.
lovely.
Um, nowhere near as long as In Search of Darkness or anything, but just a lovely little kind of look on his life. I knew everyone that knows Tom Savini probably knows quite a lot about his life. If they've seen him, he talks a lot about it. But this is
Yeah,
kind of the same kind of thing, but just just done. It's just done in a really, really nice way, isn't it? You know, you get to hear about his brother and his family. He comes from quite a big family, doesn't he? And like the sad loss of
yeah,
his brother, and
that's right.
just kind of his family life as his career's gone on, and the sacrifices he's made, you know, to be with his family and stuff. And you
Yeah,
know, he's done it all for the love of it. And you know, he never really had any help to do it. You know, he says that he never really had an agent until a good what 10-15 years into his career or
that's
something. He
right.
was saying
Yeah,
it's just really nicely done, and lots of people, you know, just have so many nice things to say about him, and he does seem like a really nice guy. There's a really funny bit in the end credits as well, though, the Alice Cooper bit, where
oh,
he sits
that's
there
lovely. Yeah.
and goes, "Oh yes, my good best friend Bob Savini," and someone goes, "No, it's Tom." It's like, "Oh yeah,
Fabulous. Yeah, it is
no,
really
it's
nice,
a
isn't
nice
it?
one." Yeah.
I always like Tom Savini's massively important, isn't he, to
Mm.
the 80s horror things we were just talking about. He for a while he had a reputation of being kind of grumpy at fan events and stuff, and I met him when I was really young. Like I've forgotten what the tie-in event was. It was in, I think it was a Watford Film Fair, which was a regular thing back then, and I was about 17 or something like that, and he was showing a really cool like reel of his special effects behind the scenes, which back then didn't have DVDs, so this was like revolutionary, like wow, seeing behind the
Mm.
scenes of how he did blah de blah in Thingamabobby.
Mm.
And he was talking about it, and he was really engaging. He didn't like, I think Scream had just come out, and he wasn't very complimentary of Scream, and he was
No,
bigging
I
up,
could see
bigging up the
why.
80s stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
me too. And the audience at the time of horror fans were kind of a bit sniffy about Scream, and I was probably one of them, to be honest. And came round to it in the end. But yeah, he was actually all right. I mean, he was relatively quiet, but then he wasn't. He was pleasant, and he signed all our stuff, and he did the photo thing. But what he really shone in was just how articulate he was talking about his stuff, and some of that's in the movie, in the documentary. Like that, I think in that event, it was the first time I learned about him being in Vietnam as a photographer and being inspired by the real life brutality and the state of corpses and how
Hmm.
people looked when they died, and how that channeled through to his really impressive makeup effects. So I think the documentary does a great job, as Sarah said, of humanizing a guy that we don't know a huge amount about. And you ended up, as you said as well, thinking, oh, he's really nice, and he gave it all up, or he spent this time just bringing up his daughter because he
Hmm.
had to.
Hmm.
um, and nowadays he does different stuff, doesn't he? He's retired from the makeup biz.
Yeah, he was saying, all the years of sculpting and stuff has like really messed with his hands, and so he can't really
Yeah,
do it quite so well now. But he runs his school and stuff, for upcoming special effects and makeup artists and stuff. So, you know, he's looking for the next Tim type thing. So,
yeah, and hopefully, I mean, there will be. It's a strange time right now, isn't it? That back when he was first around, there were a lot of people like Greg Nicotero and all those guys that were inspired by him and doing sometimes equally fabulous makeup
mm,
effects jobs. And we've kind of shifted away from that a bit, but I think the appreciation is strong, so that stuff will always be around in some way, um, even if it's from directors that grew up watching that stuff like we did. So yeah, documentary. Oh, it's Smoke and Mirrors, isn't it?
Smoke and Mirrors, yeah.
It's a very good watch, and that's also on Shudder. Uh, which, yeah, this should be the last. This is ridiculous. It's a puff piece for Shudder, which is their fault
Yeah,
for putting out such good quality stuff.
I know. We haven't been able to watch anything else because there's just too much good stuff on there. But yeah, I think that is it for me.
Yeah, me too. I think I would just mention really briefly. I did get the latest Blu-ray of The Woman in Black, which Network have put out. This is the 1989 version, which scared the bejesus out of me on Christmas Eve in 1989. It was terrifying. So The Woman in Black is a book by Susan Hill, written in the tradition of ghost stories by people like M.R. James. If you like ghost stories, the book is fantastic, and it led to a really popular London and beyond stage play, which I never got to see, annoyingly. Apparently, it's outstanding and really frightening. Um, there's two movies of it. The Daniel Radcliffe version was pretty popular from the revived Hammer films a few years ago, which a lot of people, a lot of horror fans kind of took against, and I found a bit irritating. I mean, it's not bad, and I actually quite like Daniel Radcliffe. I think he's done some really interesting stuff. It's easy
Yeah,
to
same.
knock him. He's a talented guy, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Um,
I've liked pretty much everything he's done so far. So yeah,
yeah,
I quite liked Women in Black. I didn't
sure,
dislike it.
absolutely, yeah, no, absolutely, and a lot of people did like it. And the choices he's made in his career have been really bold for a guy that was, seemingly destined to be pigeonholed. Ah, it's Harry Potter. He's probably the most
Yeah,
interesting of all the, well, of the three
yeah,
actors, actually by
and
far the most
and
interesting.
yeah, and he has got rid of that stigma.
Yeah,
He can be whatever he wants to be, type thing
yeah,
now. He's not just Harry Potter. He's got a lot of other stuff he can do.
madly talented. Yeah, absolutely. And that's really cool. And I think my problem with the Daniel Radcliffe version is just because I was a snob about the old version because I was terrified by it in 1989. So it's another, Stephen can't let go of the past.
Yeah,
Um,
it's never going to be the same.
it's not going to be the same. Um, Although I have to say, I mean, Susan Hill actually likes the Radcliffe version and doesn't like the 1989 version, which is really interesting. Um, and and the ending, the weird thing about The Woman in Black is the ending of every adaptation is different. So the book has the ending, the stage play
Hmm.
has a different ending, the 89 film has a different ending again, and the Radcliffe version has, well, in my opinion, the worst ending. Um, because it really is dodgy Hollywood ending. But the ending of the 1989 version was one of the two things that terrified me so much when I was 11 at Christmas, watching this with my family. The ending of that new version, of that old version, which is now on Blu-ray. You just no, they went there, really. Uh, you, and to watch that, to watch that at such a young age when not that many things scared me because I was a big horror fan, but occasionally
Mm.
something really did, and when it did, it would stay in my head for a long time.
Yeah,
And
especially at Christmas.
yeah, Christmas, Merry Christmas, Mum. Oh,
I can't sleep.
I'm just gonna stay up. Um, and there's a great scare halfway through. I mean, it's a deliberately, so it's very different to Daniel Radcliffe version, of course, because that's got some more jump scares and things in it to kind of be commercial, which it had to be. But the TV version that's now out on Blu-ray does have one massive scare, which is kind of a jump scare, although it doesn't feel like it because it's not as cornily done as a jump scare. It just kind of happens. You're like, no, Jesus. But otherwise, it's pretty quiet. But there's always that spooky sense of something not quite right, and then it all makes sense when it delivers the ending, which still I sat there with the chills and the willies and all those things going up me, sitting on my own watching it. What is it, 30 years later, and it's the first time I'd actually seen it properly since that 1989 showing on ITV in the UK, because it had a dodgy DVD release which was really poor quality, and I think I watched it, but it was kind of spoiled by the quality, so this was a nice chance to revisit it, and it's just really spooky and really well done. It's a nice Blu-ray edition as well. It's it's quite an old TV movie, so it's not going to look like the Avengers or anything, not that Avengers, but it does look very, very shiny and beautiful, and of course terrifying. Yep, so go buy it. Yes, well, that's recently seen, Sarah, and that was a good recently seen, I thought, wasn't it? Some good
Yeah,
recommends.
good stuff.
We should admit, I mean, there's some stuff going on. Fright Fest is this coming week in the UK. Before we move on to our main topic, it's worth giving them a shout out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's normally, as we said, I think before, it's like a 5-day event in Leicester Square with wall-to-wall movies, guests, Q&As, all that kind of stuff you'd expect from a festival. This year, it's doing the same thing, really, but it's doing it all on the internet web. So it's all going to be on a screen at home.
Yeah, a little bit lonely.
it's it's the slightly familiar experience of watching a horror film on your own.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never actually done like the whole Fright Fest experience of going to the cinema and with
Yeah,
masses of other people and stuff for a 5-day festival. And I'm wondering if I ever will now. But this is
too.
a way that lots of people can kind of sit in on
Yeah,
these new films, that you're possibly not going to watch or be able to see for a good few months or so. So
yeah.
I still think it's good, and there is one that I'm very excited about.
Which is
Sky Sharks.
Sky Sharks.
I've been waiting for this for a long, long time. I remember you guys getting a flyer or something
Yes,
about it for me from at least 3 or 4 years ago now, and
it
I was
really
like, oh
was.
my god, Nazi zombies riding flying sharks. That was literally what was on the postcard, and I was like, well, this has to happen. And like every year since, I've been like, is it out yet? Is it out yet? Is it out yet? And then it kind of all went really quiet. And then this year they've
Yeah,
gone, yep, here it is. And
yeah.
you're just like, oh my god. No, not only is it just Nazi zombies and flying sharks, but it also has Tony Todd in it as well.
It does. Yeah, and he's lovely, isn't he? He's a great actor. He probably should be getting roles in the biggest movies going, but he's obviously, he's quite loyal to horror and genre stuff. Yeah, it looks good. I've chosen to believe that the long time it's taken to come is a positive, as in, they've done
Yes,
this to it and they've spruced it up,
absolutely.
added more cool bits, whatever the reason is. I've chosen to think that's a positive. Yeah, Sky
It's
Sharks
going to
is
be awesome.
the opening film. That's pretty cool. And you know what? That's probably a great example of something where you will miss the audience atmosphere. The two best kind of things to watch at Fright Fest as an audience member were always like the kind of silly ones, the late night ones where if you were a bit drunk, it helped, and you didn't mind if people kind of were a bit noisy because it created that great hub of excitement. And then the really scary ones, like I never forget. And it's kind of sad that, like you said, I don't know if this will ever happen again. Not just because of the old one thing and another coronavirus, but also just because the screens have got smaller. Like we watched The Orphanage in what was then, I think, a 1,300 seat auditorium at what was then the Empire Leicester Square. It's now Cineworld.
Yeah.
A couple of years later, they basically tore the screens in half, and they created, or maybe even more, they created like 4 small screens from that one massive one.
Oh,
And
that is a shame.
It's a real shame that I think the Fright Fest of 2009 was the last time it was there, and there was a sense of sadness because this screen was massive, and you could get the entire weekend pass holders. You could get
Mm.
everybody in that one screen. And watching The Orphanage, which I really like. I mean, I haven't watched it much since, but the great Treasure experience was the audience was entirely quiet, and the one great jump scare in the film, it seemed like everybody jumped at the same moment, and raucous laughter afterwards because they felt silly,
Yeah.
but you could hear a pin drop leading up to it, and then it freaked everybody out, and it felt like a kind of rock concert in
Yeah.
kind of vibe about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Fright Fest will be at home. They have a good lineup. There's some interesting stuff, documentaries as well. There's a quiz, short film showcase. Some of the stuff is free. The movies you have to pay for, but the quiz is free. And I think a few of the other little bits and pieces are free, like a podcast recording and stuff like that. But it's possibly the way the festival is going to be. I think they're doing an October event in the flesh in London. But with the idea it was going to have to be a 60% capacity at the most, from what I gather. So from what they were saying on the Zoom call the other night, which they did for the fans, they're probably going to do an online element tying in with the physical one somehow. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work, but they fully appreciate they might not be able to fit a lot of people in, but also that a lot of people might not want to go and spend a few days with some strangers.
Yeah, and who knows what's going to happen in the meantime? Everything's still quite up in the air, so
Yes,
you
yeah,
can
two
plan for it,
months.
but it doesn't mean it's going to go ahead as yet.
No, we just don't know, which is a shame. But we
Yeah.
can still, still at least able to something you couldn't have done even just maybe 20 years ago. This kind of ambitious thing online you couldn't have done not so long ago at all.
No.
Doing it on dial-up, I don't think would quite work.
No.
Oh,
It would all have been a bit slow.
you finally get film one loaded on the last day of the festival. Sky Sharks. Oh, what? It's broken up.
It's 3 hours long.
Yes. Yeah. What is that? Is that pixelate? Is that a shark? Um, it would have been worth it for a giggle. So yes, all of which madness brings us on to the retro rewind section of the program. And Sarah, today's retro rewind is something you might have a bit of interest in. What is it today?
I believe it is the Evil Dead franchise. Dun, 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 the best movies ever.
The Evil Dead franchise. The Evil Dead franchise. So where do we start? With the original Evil Dead, which is called The Evil Dead. So The Evil Dead came out in Britain, at least, in 1982, 1983. It was the biggest video. Astonishing to look back now, but it was like the most rented video in the UK in 1983. It was massive. It had a huge wave of publicity attached to it. It did get a cinema release in the UK. It was slightly cut, not as much as it was cut later on. But unfortunately, its success coincided with a wave of hate against horror movies, and it became one of the most notorious of what in the UK busybodies called the video nasties. So it was banned. And it wasn't just banned, it was banned in a silly way where Sam Raimi even had to come to England to defend it, although in the end he didn't actually go on the, in the courtroom and do so, but he was invited down to do so. So The Evil Dead was always a bit of a bad boy in the UK. I think the rest of the world probably got the joke better than Mary Whitehouse and some of the others. But horror fans, of course, always got it. And The Evil Dead is the archetypal cabin in the woods film. it's stripped down as stripped down can be, even more so than some of the slasher films that we've already spoken about this year's episode. 5 people in the woods get possessed by demons because they stupidly read some stuff out and played a tape of the Necronomicon. And of course, it's the first go round for a very young, fresh-faced looking Bruce Campbell. Sarah, when was the first time you watched The Evil Dead?
Oh gosh, probably when I was kind of teenager, so in the kind of early mid-90s type thing.
Wow.
When I watched it, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was just crazy. You just couldn't get over like just the gore of it and stuff. I hadn't seen an awful lot of stuff like that. I think that then led me on to all the zombie movies and my love of zombie movies, which is kind of weird because it's not necessarily a zombie movie, but I like to think that the Deadites are zombies.
Yeah. It is. It's like a hybrid, isn't it? It's somewhere between an Exorcist style gruesome possession and a zombie. Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. I like that it's neither. It doesn't commit to either, but it's mixing. I suppose it is. I mean, there's specific shots that there's one particular shot that's a direct lift from Night of the Living Dead. So I think the influence was a massive. Night of the Living Dead and The Exorcist being probably the 2 biggest ones. I suppose I think they were making it in 1979ish. I think so. Dawn of the Dead had come out as well. Do you ever watch the short film that inspired this, Within the Woods?
I did indeed, and it was cool. I never saw it on YouTube, and it was really, really, really bad quality. But
Yeah,
it takes a lot. You can kind of see the the way they went about it to create the Evil Dead, but then it's kind of swapped around, isn't it? You have Cheryl as the kind of
yes,
good guy, and Bruce is the one that gets possessed and stuff within the woods, but they kind of swap it around for the Evil Dead. So they kind of have Bruce stepping up, and he's the one that saves the day, or he doesn't
yeah,
really save the day, but he survives.
yeah. After a fashion, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so this was inspired by that, and there's loads of great reading you can do about how this film came to be, and Sam Raimi getting funding from doctors and other kind of
Lawyers. Yeah.
lawyers, the community pillars that funded this kind of gritty, gruesome horror movie, which of course was done with the kind of mad energy and mad talent that put pretty much everything else into the shade. Like I don't know if there. I mean, there's some amazing gore movies of the 80s, but they're usually bigger budget things like American Werewolf or The Thing. I don't think any other film at this budget level in this period comes close to The Evil Dead, right?
No, absolutely not. Because it's quite early on, and they used the whole claymation thing as well.
Yeah,
That was really cool. The melting bodies and stop motion and stuff. That was really good.
yeah, yeah. That stuff's good, and that's quite a nice throwback, isn't it?
Mm.
I think I would never find this movie. I never quite got why people would, apart from one scene which we'll talk about. I never quite got why people would find this offensive because it's shot through with that zany humor that is very much what we'll talk about with the later films, especially. But it's there in The Evil Dead, even though it's trying to be scary most of the time. And it's also got the charm of things like the claymation, which is a holdover from a different era, really, mixed with the splatter that was now obviously in the Savini era a big thing. Let's go over some like key moments and key scenes. When I went back and watched The Evil Dead quite recently, it reminded me, which is easy to forget, it reminded me it's a pretty scary film, isn't it? It's got
Mm.
a real sense of dread about it from
Like
the
right
beginning.
from the beginning, yeah. Cheryl sitting there drawing the clock and then just kind of zoning out. Even that was kind
Yes.
of unnerving to start off with. And literally, it's just right from the start, the whole camera just going through the woods.
Yeah, that's incredible, isn't it?
It's still like one of the best sequences ever, isn't it? It really
I
unnerves you, like straight away, literally just following people through the houses from miles
Yeah,
off,
yeah,
increases the dread. A lot of
absolutely.
things have tried to copy that, but they never actually get quite that same sense, do they? That you do from
No,
Evil Dead.
it's massively influential, and but you can watch it loads of times and still go back and think, oh
Yeah.
man, this hasn't aged. I'm not bored of this. I think I possibly rewatched Halloween too many times because now when I watch it, I don't get as much out of it anymore. I still love it,
Mm.
nothing's changed. But whereas The Evil Dead, I think I've probably watched as many times, but I'm never kind of thinking, oh, I didn't need to watch this again. I'm always thinking, oh, I'm glad I rewatched this again because I'd
Yeah,
forgotten that
absolutely.
extraordinary shot. How did they do that? Um, it is great. There's kind of a bit of a build up. I mean, because it's short. I mean, it doesn't mess around. There isn't
Mm.
really the backstory is done really cleverly because it's done in scenes that are tense. It's done through the tape recorder. It doesn't have like a 10-minute sequence where they meet someone and say, I'll tell you about the murders here 50 years ago. Um, and it introduces the characters who I mean, Bruce by default is likable because I mean he's the only one that the movie spends time to make you care about, right?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah. I mean, you don't care much for the is it Scott?
Scotty's terrible, is he? Such a
Scott and Shelley. Yeah, you don't care much for them, but I have to admit, I like Cheryl and Linda. They're quite sweet, but yeah, Bruce is
yes.
he's really understated in this one though, obviously, which we'll go on to mention in the other ones. He kind of comes out of his shell a bit more, but in this one, he's just kind of quiet, kind of nervous, but still incredibly cute.
He is really cute. He obviously was very young. But there's something quite nice, isn't there? And I like the fact that the nice little character touches that prove really essential later, like the bit there's that nice, quite old-fashioned, quite sort of I don't know what the word. It's like deliberately corny sequence with him giving the gift to his girlfriend while she's
Oh
pretending to be
yeah,
asleep.
yeah,
Um, and that it's a necklace, isn't it?
yeah,
And that will prove really essential later on when he has to use it to grab the thingy out of the thing and then put it in. Yeah.
yep.
Um,
Mm.
so that seems like a throwaway moment, but it's a setup for something that's much more exciting later on. But it's for
It's
him,
still
it's a
really
nice little
sweet.
touch.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you are really rooting for him because he's a nice guy, and Scott isn't. Scott's a bit of a dick, really. He's a bit
he
selfish.
is.
He would happily, stitch the others up if he got out alive. That's the impression I get was, yeah. I think he even says to hell with you guys at one stage.
Yeah, I think he does. Yeah. Well, I think that's
um,
after he's had to chop his girlfriend up, so slightly
so,
understandable. But
same,
yeah,
same.
after that bit with the necklace, everything just kind of goes a little bit wrong, then, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and it goes wrong spectacularly, and there is that mate. I still to this day when I rewatch it every time, there's still that moment. I don't know if you can guess which one, but there's one moment which I still think is actually really scary and disturbing. Guess which one it is? It's not the bit in the forest.
It's not the bit in the forest. Okay, so it must be the ankle, the pencil with the ankle.
Oh, that too. I hadn't forgotten about. But yes, that too. That's
Oh,
the harshest bit of
that's
gore, I think.
it just makes you cringe every time.
It's a great effect as well, isn't it? Jesus, that's and I don't think you see that kind of thing much. I mean, I always think of things like that as more of a relatable injury, isn't it, than getting your head cut off because we can sort of relate. We know we use pencils all the times,
Yeah,
um, and all the time, and we know how much it hurts to certain parts of the body to be injured, and
yeah,
then
stabbing it in
combining
your
that,
ankle.
ah, it's a bit like the slashing of the Achilles tendon in Pet Cemetery by the little kid.
Yeah,
That makes me cringe. Like, yeah, no,
yeah. So if it's
yeah,
if
the
it's not that bit, which bit is it?
Well, it's a non-gory bit, but it always makes me go, "Oh, blimey!" Obviously, not as camp as that because I'm so macho. But it's the bit where I hope I've got the character name right. But who's the one that thinks she can read people's fortunes with the cards, or she thinks she's got ESP? Which character is that?
Oh, it's like Shelley.
Shelley. So she's doing this. She's not really accurate, is she? She's saying, "Oh yeah, that's the ace of spades or whatever," and she's got it completely wrong. But they're humouring her, and then suddenly you realise that it must be Linda, I guess, at the window has been
Cheryl.
possessed. It's the reveal.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's Cheryl at the window who suddenly
Cheryl,
then starts saying the cards.
Jack
Yeah,
of Diamonds, and then she
yeah. That
picks
is
up.
creepy.
Oh, yeah. I used to find that really terrifying because it always took me by surprise. I was never quite sure which part of the film that was at, so it never seemed to be in the same place twice. Somehow, it was one of those scenes. Yeah, that's a great moment. Take me through some of your favourite moments, Sarah.
Um, well, I wouldn't say the bit in the woods is a favourite moment because it's really quite graphic, really, isn't it? I think that was
Yeah,
one of the things that everyone was like so up in arms about was the whole she actually got raped by a tree type thing, and what has that
yeah.
got to do with anything?
It's the
But
only moment, isn't it? I think it's the only truly nasty moment in the whole series, and from what I can remember, Sam Raimi seemed to regret having it in there. But I always wondered, how influenced he was. by what kicked off in Britain, really, because that was presumably quite upsetting to be kind of humped into a bunch of people that were seen to be producing really horrible films. Um, yeah, it stands out because they actually went to a place that otherwise the Evil Dead films doesn't go to. Um,
Um, there's also a part in the when Ash goes down into the basement. I think it's when I think he's had to get rid of Linda, and he's down in the basement, and the light bulb just starts filling up with
yes,
blood, and then the whole bit down the projector behind him and stuff goes down with blood. That's really effective as well. And the
that's
whole bit where he has to like bury his girlfriend and stuff.
yeah, yeah, that's quite harrowing, actually, isn't it?
Mm.
Um,
Even
I
the
always,
ending,
yeah, it
the
doesn't
ending,
let
it
anyone
doesn't.
off.
No, it doesn't at all. There's never a final end to any of it, really. Any of the Evil Deads.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, yeah. The whole point is he's totally hapless. You know, whatever he does, even when he's become a bona fide hero, it never goes right. And
Yeah,
this was the setup for that. And this was
he's
also, I
gone.
guess, the setup for endless scenes of Bruce being thrown into shelves and getting
Yeah,
buried by a wardrobe, um, which I always liked. Um, so I think the slapstick was always there, but it's in the context of something that's a lot scarier than what would be the sequels, I guess, because it was still Bruce being bashed around an awful lot to the point where it became funny. It wasn't even in this
mm,
first one.
mm,
Um, yeah, I mean it's an intense movie, and I think that sequence in the woods is really good. Actually, I mean it holds up as still pretty shocking. There's a couple of shots there where it still takes you by surprise that they actually went as far as they did, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily out of place because ultimately, even though it is that kind of sequence, it's still a tree and it's still demons. So it's still in a kind of almost comfortable supernatural place rather than
yeah,
something horrible that I can't watch so easily, like I Spit on Your Grave or Last House on the Left.
mm.
Um, so I think that's a little different. Um, yeah, no, it holds up so well. Um,
And having Cheryl being down in the cellar and stuff, was also quite scary
yeah,
as well. For me, when I was younger, like cellars, I was then like, yeah, we're not going there. No, not that
yeah,
we have very many cellars in this country, but if you ever see one, that's all I instantly think of
we
is
did.
just a demonic Cheryl, like banging the trapdoor and stuff.
That is the stuff of nightmares, isn't it? That
Yeah,
stuff, and
yeah, when
the
you're younger.
yeah, and the way their voices change and the look of them as well. And of course, the trickery that they can manipulate, they can pretend they're back to normal again. Oh, it's okay, I'm me again. And it's all a ruse. So there's some pretty clever demons, and yeah, it doesn't hold back from being proper nasty and proper gruesome. Um, yeah. Where would you put if you have do you have a rating system where you can rank the Evil Dead films, all
Oh,
four of them?
absolutely. Yeah, all
Where,
four of them. Do you want me to rank them now?
yeah, you should. Yeah, where would this figure in the four?
This one's my number two.
Okay.
Yeah, because Evil Dead 2 just had that little edge slightly over it for
Yeah.
me.
I reckon that's probably. I reckon Evil Dead 2 is probably the most popular one, isn't it? Um,
Yeah, definitely.
and quite understandably. Um, yeah, yeah. Let's talk about Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead 2 is mental, isn't it? The I think in Kim Newman, I think was the one that said, it talks about Evil Dead, the original. Then it says Evil Dead 2 just puts its foot through the floor and goes insane, which pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, yeah. I do kind of wonder how they managed to kind of get away with it, because you kind of have, most sequels tend to follow on from the first one, but Evil Dead 2 is more of a kind of slight rehash of the
Yeah,
idea of the first one, isn't it? Because it just dispenses with quite a few of the characters, and it just sticks with Ash and Linda being the ones that go to the cabin. So it's literally
yeah.
just those two to start off with.
That's right. Yeah, there is a sense that he just wanted to. He had more money. He wanted to do it in a different way because I think he was genuinely upset by the controversy about the original, um, and he kind of wanted to remake it in a slicker way. I guess there was always that sense, wasn't there? Um, so I think actually this was probably the first Evil Dead film I saw because it made sense. So I didn't think I needed to watch the first one because I don't think at that time the first one had been re-released in England. So I think this is the first one I watched,
Mm. I
which
think that is the
yeah,
way that happens quite a lot.
yeah. in this case, it gives you a slightly false impression about what the original is like, because it is very different tonally, isn't it? The second one.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is that it's like everything about the original, but amped up to 11, and all of the kind of Three Stooges kind of humor that obviously those guys loved, and all of the abuse that they loved heaping out on Bruce, amped up to 12. It's just
Absolutely. Yeah, he goes through so much in that one, but it's absolutely hilarious. I had to write, we were going to kind of do like a top 10 like Bruce scenes, weren't we? And I just couldn't do it. I've got like 20 because most of them are from Evil Dead 2 being my favorite scenes, my favorite Bruce scenes. There's just so many of them.
Evil Dead 2 is astonishing. I mean, I think it has to be the number one of the Evil Dead films. I was going to be like contrary and say the first one, but the more I think about Evil Dead 2, you couldn't not, because I think it's possibly one of the greatest films of all time in terms of energy and humor and how well he plays it in the most
Absolutely.
mental circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah, he's cutting his own hand off, and you're looking at him going, "Oh, he's still really hot though." He's cutting his own hand off, but that's quite hot.
He is. He's a great comic actor. We'll obviously talk about his other stuff soon, but it's a very knowing kind of performance. Like, there's a lot of melodrama. And no, when he sees the bridge is gone, and he kind of, the way he looks, he's larger than life. He's like a comic book character that's come to life in a lot of ways. He's very handsome, but he's not really next door handsome. He's larger than life. He's something else, but also strangely goofy at the same time, and of course totally hapless with everything. And it's sadistic how much he's tormented, and so much of Evil Dead 2 is him on his own, which I think
exactly.
is probably unique for anything, really. I don't remember any other horror movie that's got just one character on their own for such a long amount of time like this does. There's moments where he's just sitting in a chair and screaming at nothing.
and then just laughing.
Yeah, the laughing.
The whole laughing bit. That's an iconic scene. I mean, everyone's got the poster of Bruce staring up and laughing, haven't they? I have.
Who's laughing now? Yeah. And that's an amazing sequence. Like, that's the whole movie maybe is like a kind of, I suppose it's like the fairground ride version of Evil Dead. And that scene where the lamp's laughing and the moose is taking the piss and the books are laughing.
The books are laughing.
And the jokes are deliberately corny, like he puts the bucket down with the book of A Farewell to Arms on top of it, so he's trapped the hat.
Yep, that's great. That's hilarious stuff.
It is brilliant.
Just chasing after his own hand.
And it gives him the finger.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just incredible. It's just endless invention. So I think the first one is relentless dread, but with that sense that they're not taking it massively serious. But this one is just we've got the money to do it bigger scale.
And then after you've had all that stuff, I mean, all that stuff happens at the beginning with Bruce and stuff, doesn't it? The first half of the film is literally just kind of them two, and then you're then joined by some more people, and you get to know more about Professor Noby and his lovely wife, Henrietta.
Henrietta's one of the great characters. Yeah. Which is,
and I didn't
Ted
know.
Raimi, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know that for ages. I didn't actually realise that Ted played Henrietta.
Yeah, I probably only knew through Fangoria or something. I gradually found this stuff out probably long after, like you said, long after you watched
after the film. Yeah.
And then you saw I think maybe there was a TV show, maybe it was the 90s or 80s, called This Is Horror with Stephen King, where that I think had a bunch of behind the scenes stuff, and possibly that had Ted Raimi in his Henrietta fat suit. Maybe, I'm not sure, and there's the Jonathan Ross show had a few things like that as well.
Yeah, on my DVD versions I've got of the movies, I've got two really good little documentaries on the end. On the end of the Evil Dead, I've got One by One We Will Take You, the Untold Saga of the Evil Dead, which is a great one. It came out in 2007, I believe, but that's a great story. You might have heard rumors about how the actors and stuff didn't get on with each other and stuff like that, but they put all that down and say no, that's not how it was. They just said it was just really tough to do the movie and stuff.
It really looks it. It's almost exhausting to watch, isn't it? Because the amount of stunts and gags and blood effects, geysers of blood. Oh, it's just mad.
Yeah, the contacts they had to have, just the way they
Yeah.
did the effects and stuff in the 80s. And then on my Evil Dead 2, I've got the making of Evil Dead 2, The Gore the Merrier, which is really fun little documentary at the end of the movie and has a great little short movie made by Greg Nicotero called The Evil Dead
Oh,
Baby. That's great fun.
because this was an early gig for them, wasn't it? Like,
Yeah,
because Greg's in Day of the Dead and worked on Day of the Dead, but this is like probably the major early gig for them.
yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's a really good little documentary. Very funny little bits about Sam and his drawing of storyboards and stuff like that. It's very funny. And loads of stuff of Ted in the Henrietta suit and stuff.
It's just tremendous. It's got some amazing sequences. The bit which I think was in the trailer, but the bit that I always loved when I was first in love with these movies was the woman that screams and the eyeball flies into her mouth.
Yeah,
That's
that's they always go on about that being a typical Three Stooges gag, isn't it? That they totally ripped off, but it just works so well in that instance. It
it,
had to
it
be done
really
like that.
does. And again, it's in the context of the madness of everything else, and it's just a really well done gag. I mean, the execution of that is incredible because you don't think about how it was done or anything. Just like wow, and it's adding to the cartoonishness, I guess, of everything else. And Bruce is more cartoonish in this.
Yeah,
Um,
he's definitely more animated and just more confident.
yeah, yeah, it's a real transformation, isn't it? Because he's a bit more, like you said, he's a bit more quiet, and he's obviously the handsome friend of Sam
Mm.
Raimi's that was always going to be the lead actor in any movies that he made. But by this, he's almost at the stage where you think if he didn't have Bruce Campbell's face, which is always a little kind of knowing and comic booky, he could have probably been an action star in some, B movie
Yeah,
action instead of horror because the physical stuff's good. He's obviously more pumped up in this one, and he's even got the classic action star montage, obviously ending in groovy, where he's tooling up and getting ready for
yes,
everything.
yeah,
So
man.
his career, I guess, could have gone differently, although he's ended up doing loads of different genres and things.
Mm.
Um, but that is a massive transformation. But it's more fun, The 80s action stars were typically pretty po-faced. They had the one-liners, but he was always clearly slightly taking the mick, at least. You know, out of himself with the eyebrow acting body
Yeah,
style. Um,
yeah. I would agree. He could have done anything really. To be fair, and a lot of people would have watched it. But I'm glad he stuck with what he did.
yeah, me too. Yeah, absolutely, of course. Because these as much as it's about Sam Raimi's mad style and all the different things, miniatures, matte paintings, gore effects live on the set, stop motion, all the things we mentioned. The movies are massively pivoting around Bruce because the more they go on, and by Army of Darkness, it's entirely Bruce's show, really.
Oh my god, yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's a completely different little creature, but
yeah, but you
he.
couldn't imagine it without him.
Oh my god.
So
No.
any more like total highlights from Evil Dead 2?
Oh, we mentioned? Oh, Linda's head biting him on his hand, which then leads on to his possessed hand. All kind of goes
With the
together.
crockery.
Yeah. And I've written one down here. Evil Dead 2, coming out of the cellar with half a shirt. I've put that as one of my favourite scenes.
That's where he finally arrived as that kind of character.
Yeah. Just like, yep. Yeah. No, I think that's about it. We'll leave it on the half a shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the best end note anyone could hope for. It is great. I love all the little details, isn't it? Even that great, massive, that huge kind of hero bit of music that plays when he's got himself all ready and you're waiting for something amazing and he just says groovy. You know,
Groovy. That's the best line ever.
it is.
It is what he's known for, isn't it? But he very doesn't really say it very much after that. But that's just you're just like that is where that should go, and you never
Yeah,
forget it.
it is. Yeah, and I suppose actually, yeah, the dialogue in the film is pretty sparse because it's so much about his expressive face. It's so much about
Mm.
reaction shots, and the gore is dialed down. It's more about kind of sillier gags, I guess, and more slime than there is actual gore and
Yeah, I
shadow
suppose. Yeah,
stuff.
and the blood coming out of the walls and
Yes.
literally just completely covering. But then obviously he has moments. Bruce has moments where he turns evil as well. The whole bit in the puddle and stuff,
It's
and
quite
then he
alarming.
comes up as possessed and it's kind of sweet how he gets himself out of it, because he just sees his like Linda's necklace lying on the floor, and that kind of snaps him out of it. So you kind of know that there's something more in him.
Yeah.
It's harder to turn him than it has been with the others.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's quite. I always quite like that moment as well. Yeah, no, it's packed full of great lines and great sequences. It probably is as near as you're going to get to a perfect film, because there's nothing in it where you think, oh, that bit was a bit flabby, or that bit didn't
Yeah,
quite
no,
work.
definitely not.
It's great. Well, the ending was always great. I mean, that took me by massive surprise when I first watched Evil Dead 2. Oh, they've gone there.
Yeah,
um,
you're like, how is this going to happen? And then it carries on for that tiny little bit where
yes,
and you're like, seriously, they're actually going to do this? And they did.
absolutely. It reminded me of like the ending of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which I'm guessing Python is part of the influence as well. I'm not sure if
It
they ever
must
confirmed
be.
that. I know Stooges is very American, but there's some real
Yeah.
Python stuff in all these movies actually.
Yes, definitely,
Um,
especially Army of
it's just a
Darkness.
flesh wound. You almost expect them to say. Um, but the ending is almost like the ending of Holy Grail, where they're like, I wonder whose idea this was.
Yeah,
Now we've written ourselves into a corner. Oh shit, we're gonna have to do the next one in the Middle Ages. Um,
yeah,
um, but it does feel like a meeting where they just sort of said, well, why not just shove him there?
yeah. We'll see where it goes from
How are we
here.
going to do that? We'll decide on the day.
Yeah,
And that's, I think, so much of the charm, isn't it? A bunch of people getting together to have a great time in, like you said, probably extremely uncomfortable circumstances with makeup and filming in this tiny cabin. Yeah, Evil Dead 2. And it was,
it's
of
one of the
course,
best ones.
it is. It's an all-time great, actually, and I don't think. I mean, horror comedy is really hard to get right, and Evil Dead 2 is probably the one that gets it more right than maybe anything else. Definitely in this
Absolutely.
period, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Sarah, set
Mm.
us up for what appears on screen. One of my favourite elements of the next one actually is the fact that on screen it comes out as Bruce Campbell versus Army of Darkness, which reminds me of old stuff like Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. I like that moment. But yes, tell us about the third movie in the quartet.
Yes. So in Army of Darkness, as we saw at the end of it, he gets chucked back to 1300 AD, I believe.
Oh, yes, I don't know. Probably yes.
Something that's what it says in the synopsis anyway, so we're going with that. And the Necronomicon is missing, I believe, and he has to go back to. Well, obviously he has to use the Necronomicon to get himself back to his own time, but it's also in this time got a load of deadites after all the villagers, whilst there is like two rival villages fighting against each other, isn't there?
Yeah.
So he has to use that to try and get himself back, but he's also got to find out where he fits in this time. He gets chucked into a pit, doesn't he, to start off with, in a
Oh
kind
yeah.
of like
Did
Star
I?
Wars
Yeah.
type battle with a deadite.
Yeah.
Oh, and he uses the best phrase ever when he starts off to introduce himself to everyone by saying, "This is my boomstick." And gives it a good old shtick about his shotgun. He's a lot more. He's a lot more cockier in this one, isn't he? He's definitely.
There's a
You
shift.
get to know more about him. You don't really know a lot about him, where he worked or anything like that in the first ones, really, do you?
No,
But in
this
this one, you
first one.
get the whole S-Mart shtick as, where he's been and what he's done. And he's a lot more cockier about it. I think it's because of where he is. He has to be a bit more like that and what he's been through to get
Yeah,
where he is.
I quite like it because not that many actors could get away with this, but yeah, he's more arrogant, and there's a sense that he's kind of convinced of his own genius at killing deadites, so it's all gone to his head, and he's now like this. Because in the first movie, of course, as we said, he's this quite romantic chap, really, with all that business with the necklace. But now he treats them mean and keeps them keen.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but hilariously, of course, and essentially, he's still as dumb as ever, and he still, walks into. Well, he literally gets his face put onto a hot stove at one point, and that pretty much sums up his fate.
And
And
he gets sent off to get the Necronomicon, and he has to recite the words, and they make him recite it several times, and he still forgets what they are.
he totally messes it up, doesn't he? Yeah.
Can
So
you remember what the words are, Stephen?
Klaatu Barada Nikto, right?
Almost Ferrata.
Of course it is. That's the whole point. Yeah, yeah. That's
But not, you didn't say necktie,
next
which is
time.
what he says. Klaatu Verata necktie.
Absolutely brilliant, because he is this blundering idiot who you of course totally love because you've spent 3 films with him and seen him become this guy, and he's now massively out of his depth. Although of course he gets the girl, he gets his first ever Ash proper sex scene, which is,
Yeah.
from memory, it's this corny thing by the fire, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, and it's really, I always found it really amusing that the actress that plays his girlfriend is Embeth Davidtz, who the same year as this did Schindler's List. So what a career! What a career!
Yeah, bit of a shift there.
It's popping across to the Spielberg set. Yeah, I think, I mean, it's a fun movie. This is always the one which I felt a bit sorry for, because and it was the same for me actually, I have to admit, but it was always the one that if you were going to do a top 3 of the trilogy, this would always have to be the third, and you'd have Evil Dead 2 at the top and the original in the middle. That's kind of how I always saw it.
Yeah.
And it is different, and it's clearly wants to be different, and I think hats off to it, because I think it had to be different. You couldn't recreate Evil Dead 2 because you'd been there, and it would be exhausting to do it all over again. So this is
Yeah, they had
lighter.
to take it somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, there's very little gore in Army of Darkness, and even things like we said, even when he gets his face put onto a hot stove, it doesn't really leave a mark. It's like a cartoon. He's reset in the next scene. And I think that's cool. I mean, it's I always thought as well, it was a bit of a shame that this is clearly designed to be like, if anything, closer to something like the Sinbad movies, complete with those skeletons.
Yeah.
That it still ended up like in America with an R rating, and in Britain it was a 15. So it was clearly should have been seen by a much younger audience, as well as the fans. I think it works both. It works as a kind of almost Saturday matinee adventure flick.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I mean, my other half hasn't watched an awful lot of them, but he walked in the other day when I was watching Army of Darkness, and he
yeah.
was just like, "This one's much better than the other two. It's more family friendly." He's like, "It's like Jason and the Argonauts or something." I was like, "Well, yeah, I guess it kind of is."
I totally agree. Yeah, and clearly Ray Harryhausen a big influence on the actually really awesome skeleton army
Yes, they
sequence,
are
which
awesome. They're
which by
hilarious as
93
well.
was, you never saw that stuff in 93. It had kind of gone the way of everything else, but felt great, and it felt right in this kind of context. um it is, yeah, because there's, you wouldn't be able, unfortunately, due to maybe, well, probably a few scenes, but especially that one scene, you couldn't show the Evil Dead to just anybody, but you could show this to just
You
anybody.
could yeah, absolutely. There is some very funny. Like you say, the skeletons are just hilarious, and there's the bit where Ash is in the graveyard and the skeleton hands are coming out of the ground, and that is literally again a Three Stooges riff off,
Yes,
isn't it? Of them
of
poking him
course
in
it
the
is.
eye, and he's putting his hand there and like pulling his mouth and stuff like that.
Yeah, of course it
It's
is.
hilarious, and then there's the whole bit between the whole thing in the windmill. I love the whole bit in the windmill.
That's really well done.
With the little tiny ashes, and he's fighting with himself,
Yeah.
and then one of the tiny ashes becomes bad Ash. So you have the good Ash fighting with them, and then the bad Ash fighting with all the skeleton stuff. And he is really well done as well. That is also Bruce, isn't it?
It is great,
He
yeah.
plays both of them.
Absolutely, and I think that's it. I think you knew it in number 2, but especially with this one, you think this is actually a great comic actor, and his whole career could have been as a kind of comedian, as a comic actor, and he's fabulous in this. He's yeah, and there's the odd like disturbing bit as well. I remember like the bit where it all kicks off with that whole thing is where he suddenly realizes like an eyeball on his shoulder. Those images, there's still an element of like, oh, that's quite disturbing actually, even though this is obviously ridiculous. um, I
Mm.
quite like that they still found time for a few things that were like, in between the Monty Python kind of Sinbad, Indiana Jones kind of stuff. um, yeah, it is fabulous, and it's again, it's extremely well done. It's, Raimi's inventiveness. I don't know how much this cost, but it feels big, doesn't it?
Mm.
And it sometimes feels like, oh, they didn't probably quite have enough scale to make this truly work, although it does have a really good music score that makes it kind of extra exciting. So they had much more access to resources they didn't have before. and it's just huge, and again it keeps going. It never really slows down. Is it this? Do you think this one has the most kind of determined effort to provide him with as many one-liners or catchphrases as possible? Yo she-bitch, let's
Yeah,
go, and hello, Mr. Fancy Pants.
give me
Um,
some shit.
Give me some shit. That's the one I was trying to think.
Yeah.
So I think maybe they were very conscious that what works really well is Bruce saying something like, "What about Yoshi, bitch?" Oh yeah, Yoshi, bitch. Yeah, yeah, terrific.
Yeah, definitely has a lot of his lines, and I didn't realize for a little while that it had two, and that the original ending is so much better than the one that they went with.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, this is important. So the original ending is the Planet of the Apes ending, right, where he sleeps too long.
Yeah, yeah, which is fair enough, but you kind of like not not sure that was the best ending, but you knew he was going to mess it up when he was told that he had to take
Yeah,
6 drops, and you watch an count, and then he gets distracted, and then he does an extra 2. So you're like,
yeah,
okay, you know that it's going to be a little bit messed up when he wakes up. But when you actually watch the original or the ending that they wanted, it makes so much more sense. It's just, I suppose it is that little bit more brutal as well, though, isn't it? Because it like ends up with him killing deadites in S-Mart.
yeah, yeah. I think that's the ending that's more fun.
Yeah, I like that one a lot, but that's the one I hadn't seen so much. And I don't quite
Yeah,
know why they decided to go for the other one. Was it just
yeah,
quicker?
me too. Yeah, me too. I never quite got it either, and for a long time I only knew this film with the drops, the
Yeah.
waking up in post-apocalyptic somewhere, um, which felt kind of right, but at the same time it's like, oh, this is not as much, this is not as crowd pleasing as I hoped.
Mm,
uh,
yeah.
as great as it was to see him with a big beard. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's tricky. It's a really confusing one because I think we got like a version that was 15 minutes longer than the US one. I think the US one's really short. I think the US version's 80 minutes, and our one with the other ending is 96 or something like that. But then there's also other versions, like there's a bootleg cut which was released on DVD. So it got a bit confusing, really. It maybe suggested that for Universal, who I think released it, they weren't quite sure. They'd got this third part in a trilogy that they were giving a bigger budget than before, but it wasn't quite ticking the right boxes because it was too silly to be serious, but a bit too dark to be for kids. So they didn't know what to do with it. And I think the ending was part of
Yeah,
that.
I suppose that ending kind of. Yeah, I suppose that ending does kind of. Yeah, is a little bit darker, or just a little bit more violent, I suppose.
Yeah,
Violent the one they went with, anyway.
yeah. It's a bit of a shame. And the movie kind of got buried in everything else, but I think it was still really appreciated by fans. There's such goodwill for these movies anyway that I think they'd have to really hash it up to not do something fun.
Mm.
But yeah, that's the trilogy. Anything else you want to say about the original three?
Um, no, I think I've covered all my bits for that.
So the Evil Dead, obviously, recently we've heard announcements for the next one, which, as far as I'm aware, is still set to be
Yeah,
directed by Lee Gambin. Is that right?
Lee Cronin, is it his name?
Oh, Lee Gambin,
Hang on,
somebody
I've
else.
got
Yeah,
it.
forget. Yeah,
I've
you're
got it
right.
written down somewhere. Yeah, Lee Cronin.
Yes, the guy
That's
that
and
trolling around.
it's yes, that's the one. We've got a name, which is going to be Evil Dead Now, and that's it. Name and the director. Not a lot else has been said about it, but I'm guessing it's going to be produced by uh, Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell, and Rob Tappert again, like it has
Yeah,
been.
I
So it's
imagine.
it's
Yeah,
gonna be a good one, isn't it? Because does this take us now on to the remake?
yeah. The remake, the 2013 remake by Fede
13, yeah.
Alvarez. Yeah. So this was, as ever with remakes, it came out in a time of many remakes of horror movies, and led to the usual immediate backlash before they'd even started filming it. Ah, how dare they?
Yeah.
But they, you know, and I think actually it's probably still one of the best received remakes from this cycle of remakes. I think quite a lot of people I know who love the old ones really like this, were taken by surprise by this one.
Yeah,
And
I think it's because it was kind of endorsed so much by the by Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi and stuff, because knowing that they were producing it and had something to do with it, I think kind of gave people a little bit more of a, oh, okay, this could be a good thing,
yeah,
rather than a sense of dread, which everyone kind of gets when you hear of the space movies getting remade. You're just like, oh god.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it's it's rather different. So they took a certain tack to it, which I think really worked. So first thing you notice is it's called Evil Dead rather than The Evil Dead. So it's stripped
Mm-hmm.
down to that. It does have a sense of humor. Like there's a post credits gag with Bruce Campbell just showing up with his catchphrase, which is pretty cool in profile. Um,
Yeah.
and there's a cool bit actually which I like. It's possibly a rare bit of kind of overt humor in the film where you get a glimpse of the Necronomicon in the first scene, and you see that the page says "Chop the motherfucker." It's just
Yeah.
that's in the book. Um, but otherwise, it's bidding to be closer to the original. Mine
Yeah.
is the slapstick stuff largely, and it's designed to be an intense thing of the kind that Fede Alvarez did really well later on with Don't Breathe. Really
Mm.
good director, actually. That's a cracking one. So it's the same setup, but there's a bit more seriousness to it. There's an addict heroine, really well played by Jane
Yeah.
Levy, who's going cold turkey, and there's been an intervention, and that's the setup. So there's a sense of a quite cool thing actually, the idea that the personality shifts of her character as a drug addict and her transformation when she's possessed are not subtle, but it's a nice parallel to the kind of backstory of her.
Mm.
And you kind of realize early on that this is not going to hold any prisoners. It's going to go all out with the nasty stuff. Like there's a lot of what I kind of think of as relatable injuries, and this really things that make you go, oh, it was snapped off hypodermics and
Yeah,
blisters
absolutely.
and
People
wounds,
cutting bits of their faces off.
knees. Yeah, and there's
Oh,
a bit where
that's
she showers in boiling water, and
yeah,
um,
and it all starts off with the dead cats hanging in the basement for me. That's when you
yes,
know that it's going to be nasty.
I think so. Yeah, and it works. And I mean, there's a lot of kind of crowd pleasing gore, like stuff with nail guns and things like that, and there's that going on. But most of the stuff you associate with the Evil Dead is back, but with a kind of serious tinge, like the possessed arm
Yes.
is
Oh
actually
yeah.
quite harrowing.
It's great how they put that in there though. They managed to get, the
Yeah.
dead cats in the basement, which I always thought was just the creepiest of touches. They
Yes.
then do the tree rape thing again, don't they? And then you
She's
have the girl cutting her hand off with an electric carving knife. You're just
yeah.
like, yes, that is it. That is all of the things that you think about Evil Dead all in one, obviously, because Bruce cuts his hand off in Evil Dead 2. That's not even in the first one at all, but they managed
Yeah.
to slip that one in there. Really
Yeah.
effective
Absolutely.
way, and it's just a massive bloodbath.
It is, yeah, and it's astonishingly gory, and it's got a nasty edge, which I think, apart from, as we said, the tree scene in the original, I don't think the other films were ever as nasty as like the tongue slicing in this, and
Oh
some of
yeah,
the
no,
dialogue
that's
as well is closer to the stuff
it's
that
quite
Regan would say.
nasty. Yeah, absolutely,
It's just
absolutely.
yeah, so it is. I really like this. I've only
Mm.
seen it twice, which is obviously a lot less than I've seen the other ones, but I would happily go back and watch this one again because I just think it's a good job, and they were right to say, oh, let's ditch the slapstick stuff because maybe let's hold on to that for the TV series.
Yeah,
Ash is truly back, and that's right
yeah,
because that's associated
absolutely.
with him.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it did really. I went to see this in the cinema, and yeah, I I found it quite exhausting with all the things that
yeah,
happened. And then towards the end, when she's outside and it literally just starts raining blood,
yes,
it just pouring down. I was just like, oh my god, this just can't go on anymore. What else can happen now? And it goes crazy from there as well. And you just think
yeah,
that they've done everything they have, but they still managed to put that extra little bit in as well. They did it so well.
yeah. I think so. And these movies, I suppose, even Evil Dead 2. probably not Amido's, but even Evil Dead 2 is kind of harrowing. I mean, if you
Mhm.
what he goes
It's
through,
exhausting. Yeah,
it is
absolutely.
draining. And I think maybe the movie's not long enough for it to be this, but I think if it did go on much longer, it would stop being funny because it would be painful. There's, I suppose comedy and horror they're linked because there is that point where all you can do is laugh at a certain level
Mm.
when it gets that far. But this is quite canny. This goes to a lot of damage and this has a lot of extraordinary stuff happening, but it never kind of becomes full on funny or anything like that. It always keeps that intensity, which is cool. Yeah, no, I really like it, and I think she's great. And I think that the twist where you think they're setting up a kind of Ash type male lead character, but actually undermines that, and she's the first to be possessed, but she turns out to kind of be the proper final
Yeah,
girl
the
kind of
one that.
figure.
Yeah, that was
That
really well
was
done.
that was
It
cool.
it makes me wonder how they're going to go about this new one that they're doing. If they're going to stick with that
Yeah,
kind of lineup of going with the female Ash type character rather than back to a male again after that one. Off the back of
yeah.
this one, you couldn't really. Could you try and change it back again? I don't know.
I just don't know. It's tricky, isn't it? Because it's also coming off the back for the real fans. It's coming off the back of the TV series as well. So we've
Mm.
settled back into that groove,
Yeah.
um, so to speak. So yeah, how can you go back? And the TV series, as you know, you will mention in a minute, but the TV series itself is contained, isn't it? It's kind of it reached the point where it's like, oh, we're done. We've done the
Mm.
3 seasons,
Yep.
we're off. And if that was the last we saw of Ash, it would be a shame. But you still think, hey, they went out on a high. They've done a cracking job.
Absolutely. Mm.
Um, and this remake is self-contained as well. You're like, well, they went back to basics, and they did a good job. So old Lee, whatever his surname is, who's talented, um, he's got it. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on old Lee.
Yeah, definitely for sure.
But as you say, it's the kind of double act of Robert Taper and Sam Raimi have been behind this. Unusually, have been behind the franchise the whole time,
The
even when
whole
it
time.
became a
Yeah.
remake. That bodes
Yeah.
well. Um,
Exactly. And I don't want it. I don't want it to end. You never want it to end, do you? So
no,
I
actually,
will
no.
definitely. I will be very keen on seeing this new one and what it'll be like. Either
Yeah,
way, but they do
absolutely.
have. It is going to be very tough to beat that remake and
Yeah.
Ash versus Evil Dead.
Ash versus Evil Dead, which brings us neatly to, of course, Ash versus Evil Dead, the TV series
Hooray!
made by Stars. Is that right?
It was shown on Stars, yeah, like well-known TV channel that everybody has. Oh,
Yes.
that it honestly, it made me so angry. I was so excited when I heard that this was coming, and when they went Stars, I went, "What the hell is Stars? Where can I get this from?" And I couldn't see it for ages because I couldn't get it over here at all. I had to get one of my friends to download it illegally for me.
Yeah,
I'm afraid to say.
that's okay. Yeah, through the forum of Baby Jesus and his endless supply of
Absolutely.
dodgy movies. Yeah, um, yeah, Stars. Yeah, it's mental, isn't it? Like, I suppose there's so much content now, but I can't believe that a show like this would disappear. I mean, I suppose at least things like FX are better known, right? Like, they could
Yeah,
have got something like
absolutely.
this.
Yeah, indeed. With the clout that Evil Dead carries, you'd have thought it'd been on like HBO or something like that.
Yeah, because we are at that point, aren't we? Or when this came out, we were at the point where it's crossed over from just being that kind of nasty movie. It became Evil Dead 2 became a cult classic, and now so many of us directors who grew up watching this have become very famous and have homaged Evil Dead 2, like Edgar Wright, especially.
Mm.
So at the point where they have entered kind of the realm of classics in the mainstream as well as just our kind of nerdy, culty horror world. So um, yeah, that is maybe a wasted opportunity. But the show, of course, there it was great, right?
Oh, the show was fantastic. I don't quite know how they came about to actually wanting to do this, but it was probably the best thing they ever could have done,
Yeah.
in my opinion. The first season came out in 2015,
Wow.
and it's been 3 seasons, 10 episodes each, all about half an hour long, and it's just insane to watch. It's just so much fun. It's basically set 30 years after the original The Evil Dead. So our Ash is older and fatter, yet still avoiding all his responsibilities, which he was kind of like. He's very much an army of darkness Ash.
Yeah.
In Ash versus Evil Dead, there's something of everything of all the Evil Deads to Ash in Ash versus Evil Dead, but he's definitely very, very army of darkness temperament in this, isn't he?
Yes.
But yeah, basically he just bumbles around and he gets like completely baked one night with a gal and decides to read the Necronomicon aloud, which once again releases the curse again. And he basically has to go around and defeat all the Deadites and try and tame the Necronomicon as such. But yeah, he manages to do it with a really, really awesome team of people as well.
Yeah, that's the great thing, isn't it?
The best thing about Ash vs Evil Dead is his little posse. They are great. He manages. Obviously, he's still working at S-Mart, so season 1 is kind of based with him working at S-Mart with his colleagues. He has Pablo, played by Ray Santiago, who has a crush on one of the other workers there called Kelly, played by Dana De Lorenzo, I believe it is. I've written her name down wrong on here. That doesn't make any sense. But yes, that's her name. And they accidentally end up getting Kelly's mother possessed. So that's when Pablo and Kelly then become on board and they then go around trying to defeat evil for this season. But we also have another character who comes in as one of the bad guys, played by Lucy Lawless.
Yes,
which is great to see. She's just fantastic in this as well. And she's called Ruby Noby, which I believe is an homage to the professors in the Evil Dead movies, because that was his name, wasn't it? Noby.
Ah, yeah, of course, yeah.
And the great thing about the series is it does have flashbacks with original flashes of the original movies and stuff, but it also has, in season 2, I believe, we have Ellen Sandweiss come back as Cheryl.
Yeah.
The original character from the first movie, which is cool. I like the continuity in that. And then we also have some lovely people. We also have the lovely Ted Raimi come back in it as well as 2 different characters. He gets to play Chet, who is Ash's drunken friend. This is all in season 2. But then he also gets to replay his little Henrietta Jovie as well, who comes back because they have to travel back in time. There's just some absolutely great moments. I could blather on about it all day and make no sense whatsoever, but there's just so many great scenes, loads and loads of gore, blood everywhere. It's so much fun. You enjoyed it, right?
I loved it. Yeah, it really is, and it's almost like something you can't believe exists, because it is like a show that's been tailor-made for us. You know,
absolutely.
They obviously saw our thoughts and they've turned it into a TV show. And it's perfectly pitched at like you said, half an hour episodes. Anything else would feel, you wouldn't want an hour of each episode. It would be too much. It'd be too exhausting.
No, it totally wouldn't.
As much
you are right. That's the only problem with it being half an hour, is that you can just literally binge watch a season in a day. I've done that before.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Before you know it,
you're just like, that was amazing, I'll watch the next one. Yeah, exactly. Might as well carry on.
And everything about it feels right. One, it's because it's always a bit risky when you've got one of those the gang's all back scenarios, like, oh no, oh god, this is a bit embarrassing. But it's brilliant, and Bruce, older Bruce, is exactly what you thought. And like you said, it's the extension of the Army of Darkness Ash. Of course, we still love him, but he's ridiculously, he's still stuck so cocky. In the past. Yeah, absolutely.
He just thinks he's God's gift to women and all that kind of thing. Which he is.
Well, of course, he is indeed, and some men. But was it is it the first scene in the show, or was it just in the trailer, the scene of him struggling to get on the what's it, and it?
Oh yeah, he puts on his little corset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To hold his belly.
Yeah, that is episode 1 of season 1.
And the great
the whole opening scene is just hilarious. You're just like back in it straight away.
You are, absolutely. And it's brilliant that for any actor really, but especially I suppose when you're at this age, to let it all hang out and to as he's done all through the series, especially in 2 and 3, to willfully take the mick out of his own image And
Yeah.
in this case, his own age. It's one of those
Hmm.
shows where he's playing his own age, which doesn't usually happen in sequels and movies generally.
Hmm.
Um, and so you're right with him, because this is older Ash, exactly as we'd expect, still stuck in the dead end job and still with dreams that haven't been fulfilled and fantasies, and still thinks he's about 24. Um,
Yeah.
it's a great characterization, but I think you're right. It works so well as it does because the risky move of giving him sidekicks paid off, because they cast it really well, and
So
they
well.
wrote those roles really well.
And yeah, that's the thing. You really get to know both Pablo and Kelly, and you absolutely love them to bits. And
Yeah,
Pablo is kind of your kind of nervous, little geeky kind of guy who's not too sure what to do with himself, and then you find out later on as the episodes go along, he's actually this like Brujo type character that can actually connect with the Necronomicon and stuff like that. And Kelly just turns into an absolute badass.
yes, she's
She's just
fantastic.
insane. She's just got a great voice as well. The way
Yeah,
she screams at things, it's really great. And they don't just use like the Deadites. They introduce all sorts of different things in the first episode and the first season. You've got, I think his name is Eligos, who possesses Kelly,
yeah,
and there's several episodes about that, and that is really gross. There is a lot of vomit and all sorts of stuff going on in there. And then in
yeah,
the second one, you have lots of demon babies. Um, the Necronomicon possesses the car. There's a great couple of episodes about the possessed car. Um, Ash's dad comes back.
oh,
He goes
that's my
back to his
favorite.
whole he goes back to his old town and goes meets up with his dad and stuff like that. That is a great ending to his dad, isn't it?
Oh, and the
Just
great
some
thing is that he's played by Lee Majors.
yeah, he's great.
Yeah, that's really, that worked really well. There was almost like, again, the great thing about Bruce's turn is that there's almost like some pathos there, as well as the humor of how ridiculous his dad is, and the outcome is mental. But yeah, I liked the back to home stuff. That worked really well.
Yeah, they do like kind of look into his life and stuff beforehand a lot more than they ever like suggested in the original movies and stuff. But it's great to see that kind of stuff because you can kind of see it tie in
Yeah.
to how it goes. I have to admit the ending of season 2 was a little bit cheesy for me with the
Oh,
whole Ash saves the town and he's like
that's right.
evil, we're gonna kick your ass and stuff like that, and you're just like, "Ugh, that was a bit
Yeah.
cheesy." But they then bring it back with season 3, which is all about he's still in Elk Grove, his hometown, but he's taken over his dad's hardware store, which is now turned into a hardware and pawn store. And there's another big demon in there because Ruby is back. Ruby goes from being evil to good to going back to evil again in season 3, and they have to defeat Baal, who is a really, really sinister character. His name is played by Joe Tolbeck. I don't know if you know him. He's an
No.
Australian guy, but yeah, he is proper creepy, really, really
Yeah.
creepy. And he manages to get into Ash's mind and sends him a few episodes. There's one where he's in a mental institution, but it's all kind of in his mind. And then you get introduced to Ashy Slashy. He's been nicknamed Ashy Slashy because the history is they didn't believe the whole demon thing and that he
Yeah.
just went and killed his sister and stuff like that. So he goes back to his town and he's known as Ashy Slashy. But when he's in the mental institution, he ends up having a hand puppet, which is Ashy Slashy. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but that became an absolute massive craze when that came out. We all wanted an Ashy Slashy puppet. I don't have one. I still need this Ashy Slashy puppet
It
because
shall
it's
be
one of the
yours.
best things ever. I
Yeah.
remember going to see when I went to meet Bruce Campbell at Walker Stalker Con. I remember wandering around to one of the stalls and one of these guys had actually made himself an Ashy Slashy puppet, and it was absolutely brilliant.
Oh
He
man.
let me touch it and everything.
Oh, I say.
But yes,
That's
that's
what it's
by
all
the
about.
by. Season 3, there are so many amazing episodes in this. There's just this one episode in the morgue. Do you remember the
Yes.
morgue episode?
That's the one. Yeah, I forgot which season it was, but that's the one where they go over that line and they keep going and going and going.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, that's
Everyone, if you
disgusting.
don't, yeah, if you don't watch anything, you have to watch the morgue. Oh, I've actually got that down as season 2. Sorry, I got that wrong.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Oh,
So
damn
that's
it! I got
quite
that one
early on then,
wrong.
season 2. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of the middle of season 2. But then in season 3, you also have the booth. So the morgue is basically an episode where Ash has to get the Necronomicon, which Ruby is hidden in a body, and the colon comes to life, and all matter of sticky, gory, disgusting grossness happens. I think that's the iconic episode of that season. And then in season 3, you have episode 2, which is Booth 3, which is a very similar situation, only in a sperm bank.
Yes. Yeah, which is about as bad taste as they
It is,
got, wasn't it?
yeah, absolutely. Just about as bad as the morgue. They went, well, we've done the colon attacking him and all that kind of stuff. What can we do in this season to make it any worse? I know, we'll put him in a sperm bank. And then
which is mental, absolutely insane.
you have another great episode in there called Baby Proof, which I think is episode 5, where Ruby creates a little mini Ash and hires or kidnaps I think it's a foreign traveller or something coming through, and the baby basically takes over her body by decapitating her and then climbing up her chuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is, I think, as it went on, it seems to me that because when it started, I wasn't sure, how far will they go, how much are they allowed to do. But I'm guessing because those extraordinary bits with the baby, which is the one I remembered along with the morgue, especially, I guess as it went along, they were left alone to do more and more stuff, and they thought, oh, why not? Let's just go for broke. This is the last
Yeah,
season,
exactly.
especially
To
number
see what we
3.
can get away with. If they could get away with the morgue, they could get away with
The bar is set.
anything.
And I don't think some of that stuff, I'm not convinced they would have been able to get away with if it was like a mainstream movie release. It's a little different, I guess, on TV.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's way over the line. And in that point of like almost like the bit in Reanimator where you go, oh, this is funny, but
should this be happening? Should I be watching this?
it's brilliant.
That
And
kind of
sometimes it did take me. I think it was in season 1. I think it's the character played by what's her name, Samara Weaver, I think. But there's a couple of genuinely sinister moments with the teenagers in the cabin or the young people in the cabin, and I thought, this has got quite serious first. Sometimes it did get serious and brought you back into something quite brutal where it wasn't necessarily meant to be funny. It was just genuinely meant to be a little bit disturbing. So it never quite lost that as much as it was slapstick and Bruce being Bruce. It was and the gross out stuff. There was some stuff where it was a bit more scary.
Yeah, there were some nasty bits in season 1 because they had the whole police element, don't they? Just kind of following Bruce as it first starts, and then you get the female police officer and the male police officer who gets impaled on the deer head in the house.
That's the bit I'm thinking of. Yes.
Yeah.
That's there's nothing funny about that, is there?
No.
Because she's quite a good character and
it's like, whoa, brutal.
It's unpleasant.
She gets it quite bad. She gets quite a lot of horrible things happen to her.
Yeah, I quite like that because I think even in Evil Dead 2, not everything's a joke. So I think as soon as everything's a joke, then you kind of lose it. But I think the series realised that, and it had enough true horror to go with everything else, and then mixed together with the great characters. It was a cracking show.
They definitely ended on a high with season 3. The ending of that is really good. Ash basically finds out he has a daughter, and Ruby is trying to destroy all his seed, and basically they end up slightly failing in that respect, don't they? As they end up letting the evil ones into the world, and then the whole thing goes global. There's like deadites and monsters everywhere, and then you have an epic battle between Ash and this like 60-foot demon type thing, and obviously Ash saves the day, but it's all very tiring and very relentless and just super action.
Massive scale.
Goes out on high, but it does do a kind of Army of Darkness type thing again right at the end. I'd forgotten about that. I only recently rewatched season 3 and I saw the ending and I was like, oh yeah, I remember this bit now. It kind of goes all a bit futuristic at the end.
Oh yeah, I'd have to rewatch that because I've only seen the 3rd season once. I need to rewatch that.
But the epic battle of the demon is awesome. It's just great. I really, really, really love the show. It's an excellent little add-on to the movies. I don't think they could have done anything better. You know, sometimes you think when movie franchises go into TV series, you think this is going to be a bad idea, but with Evil Dead, it totally wasn't. It was the opposite. It was the best thing they could have ever done. I'm glad they stuck to the 3 seasons as well. I don't feel like they should have gone on any further. It's like getting to the, you know, flogging a dead horse type thing. You don't want it to fizzle out like so many things do when you put too many series in. And I kind of feel it was a fitting end. I'm really sad that Bruce doesn't want to play Ash anymore, but I kind of understand it. It's run its course. You know, we've got some amazing movies and we've got 30 episodes of just awesomeness that we can just watch over and over again. That'll do me.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good way to go out, isn't it? And it's a nice symmetry as well of 3 movies, 3 seasons of the show. And it worked
I didn't
all the
even
way
think
through.
of that.
Yeah, I've done my maths.
Yeah, you have. That's clever. I didn't think of that. Yeah, love it.
But it could, like I said, these things don't always work. So it's to their credit, and obviously their own love of the product itself, rather than just cranking it out. They actually did something really special with it, and so much of that was the casting as well, even down to his dad. And
I do hope we get to see Ray Santiago do more, and Dana De Lorenzo as well. I need to see them do more stuff because they're cracking little actors. They're great.
They were great, weren't they? Because the great thing with them is that even though it was absolutely Bruce's show, you liked them so much that you wouldn't have minded if, you know, occasionally, for whatever reason, Bruce had an episode off and it was about them.
It was just them too, yeah. Well, sometimes it kind of is, you know, it doesn't just concentrate on Ash, does it?
No, absolutely. They've got great characters, and they're much more fleshed out than you think initially. They're terrific. They're not just the sidekicks, they're full-blown characters in their own right.
Absolutely.
Well, it's Ash versus Evil Dead. Other things, of course, were spawned from the Evil Dead movies. It's worth mentioning Evil Dead the musical.
I've never seen that.
No, I've only watched the stuff on YouTube. No, I'd love to see it. It played in, I think it only played in America. I don't think it came over here. But I have listened to the soundtrack on endless repeat, and it does have fantastic songs. The key song to search for on YouTube is Join Us, which has a great solo from the Moose, and just keeps on going. It's absolutely fantastic. And the songs are entirely what you'd expect from something called Evil Dead the musical, including one called, I think it's called All the Men in My Life Keep Getting Possessed by Kandarian Demons. That's a full-blown jazzy ballad.
Is that sung by Linda?
Yeah, I think so. And there's I've forgotten the other. Yeah, and Scotty's a dick in that as well. In the absence of being able to see it in a theatre, where I think it was that one where they got the audience to wear Max and stuff in the front rows because they got showered in fake blood.
Cool.
So you may get wet with loads of gore and stuff, which was the whole idea, I think, behind it, was to bring that energy and gore to the stage. Reanimator actually was changed into a stage production as well, which I always wanted to see. There was also, and it did come to England, but I didn't watch it. I didn't go to see it. It was, what's it called? The Elvis Dead, which is Evil Dead 2 meets Elvis. So that was a one-man show as far as I know.
All right.
And I think it played at the Edinburgh Festival. I think that was where that was here. So the Evil Dead has spawned many imitators, but also these kind of wacky, reverential stage experiences as well.
Was that kind of an ode to Bruce as his Bubba Hotep character as well then?
Yeah, I'm guessing so, actually. Yeah, it can only be, can't it, really? I suppose the two are now always linked, thanks to that. But yeah, there's more Evil Dead stuff out there for you. Which brings us to... course, next main attraction, which is a breeze through, in fact, the life and times of Bruce Campbell, for which we have someone more qualified than most to lead us off, I think, Sarah. Is that fair to say?
Oh, thank you very much. I wouldn't necessarily go that far, but yeah, I have gathered some Bruce facts. And yeah, we're going to quickly whiz through a couple of his other movies that people, if they haven't seen, they need to see.
He's made a lot of stuff, hasn't he?
He has. But yeah, I mean, I kind of have a section of stuff that he's done that I've never seen.
Yeah.
That I've just heard of. But do we want to rush through some films first?
Yeah, I think we can. Yeah, I mean, when you look at his list, it's massive. Like, there's stuff, like you said, I never realized he was on things like Ellen, and I was vaguely aware of the big TV shows, like I think 6 Years of Burn Notice, and I had seen him on Xena and Hercules, and he's very good in an episode of X-Files, which I think when you look at his stuff, you start, because you have a certain image of Bruce, usually the one from Evil Dead 2, of course, Old Ash more recently, but you forget the range that he has. So he's really good in very kind of uncharacteristic Bruce roles, rather, like the dad in this episode of X-Files called Terms of Endearment from series 6, I think, where he's a demon, so it's kind of witty casting, but he's a demon that kind of just wants to settle down and have a husband, have a wife, and have a baby, and he just has to find the right woman to obviously have his demonic offspring. And what makes it work, and they could have, of course, gone a whole other way, although it is kind of blackly comic, what makes it work is it's kind of done sincerely, and it's a sympathetic demonic character that he's playing, and so he's underplaying it, and you don't get to see underplaying Bruce a huge amount, at least in the stuff that we talk about so much. So I think that there's nice reminders out there that he can do the other thing as well, and very well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's loads of films out there that he's literally just kind of popped in on. Hello.
Yes.
And then gone away again.
Oh yeah, definitely. Big films like the Spider-Man movies for Sam.
I love his little Spider-Man things. I'm not a massive fan of the Spider-Man movies, but it's got Bruce in it. So as soon as I've seen the Bruce bit, I'm like, not interested. But Bruce's bits were great. He's just hilarious in every single one. But I think he's best as is he the French kind of waiter, concierge type thing? Is that in the third one? That's my favourite.
Yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? Yeah, it's great. Those things are worth sticking around for the little gag cameos and stuff. And he pops up in a lot because they're all joined together from their early work. He appears rather in a lot of Coen Brothers movies, things like Hudsucker Proxy, and he's in a kind of cheesy soap opera in a TV scene on the movie of Fargo, and he's later in the show of Fargo as well, just as a kind of cameo. So the links to Raimi and the Coen brothers have stayed kind of nice and loyal, which is quite sweet, actually.
Yeah. He was also in Maniac Cop as well, wasn't he? He had quite a good part in that.
Yeah, and that I always thought that fitting into the category of Bruce as sort of fairly conventional square-jawed hero character. The more action Bruce that isn't the goofy action Bruce. And it's a pretty straight role. He gets to do some cool stuff, and he's one of the main cast of that one that then gets killed in the second one. So you do get to see Bruce getting offed in Maniac
that was sad.
Yeah, you wore black like for a week. I remember.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How many films?
Quite...
Oh, sorry.
Huh?
How many films has he died in?
Oh, good question. I say I haven't seen all of his films, so
that's true. Yeah.
I need to make an effort to watch more of them, for sure. But he's great in the Maniac Cop films. But yeah, his death in that is very sad. In the second one, it comes quite suddenly as well. I wasn't expecting it, and then all of a sudden he's gone. He did it good though.
He stabbed at the newspaper vendor stand or something like that. Yeah, that was quite shocking. You expect him to stick around at least for like the end. Yeah, well, let's rumble through some. So where do you want to start with Bruce's oeuvre?
Oh, do you want to start with Crime Wave?
Oh, Crime Wave's great. Yeah, Crime Wave is kind of the black sheep, and it surprises me still. I'm guessing there's rights issues, but even though it was never particularly loved by that many people, it surprises me that no one has brought it out on some kind of singing, dancing Blu-ray set with a Bruce strap on or something as an extra, which of course I'm working on still in the workshop downstairs. Crime Wave was made in between Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 by Sam Raimi, so it is that halfway house where you kind of forget it exists. And I think it had a decent budget, but I think it was another thing like Army of Darkness, where the studio that made it were like, what's this? Because it was so bizarre and didn't really fit into any box that they could market very easily. And ultimately, from what I could tell, it was another massive feature-length homage to the Three Stooges, but in this case also to like 1930s crime movies. So how are they going to sell this?
Yeah, I thought it was really good fun though,
It is.
because I've only recently watched it, and obviously I've read lots of things about it, about how everyone thought it was such a flop, and it was, so hard work for them, especially for Sam, because that he wanted Bruce to play more of the lead role, didn't he? But the executives and stuff made Bruce audition, and they still wouldn't give him the part. So Sam then wrote him the part of Ronaldo, which is a great part. I think he plays it really well. Even though he's a sleazy, greasy, horrible character, he's really funny in it.
It is that thing again, isn't it? The self-deprecating Bruce character. He's an awful human being, but you still love him.
But I really like that movie. I think it deserves more credit. I know it was obviously a giant trudge for everyone to make by the sounds of things, but I think the end result was pretty good.
It is really good. It's really mad, isn't it? It's as mad and it's as kind of energetic as Evil Dead 2, because it's all about the massively ambitious camera moves and the frying pan in the face
and the weird, crazy, stupid voices.
Sound effect, the mad voices, and it's. I always remember it for the scene where Brian James, who's a great 80s bad guy and things like Blade Runner, he rides a giant stuffed rat that's mounted on top of a car. Because it does have these crazy chase scenes and the camera's all over the shop. He's gone mental because he's got more money than Evil Dead. He hasn't quite yet got Evil Dead 2 going, so this is the in-between time. I think it's way past the point where it should have been rediscovered, because it was always a fun movie, but probably now would hold up even better, I think, because you're away from the expectation of it turning up in the 80s. Yeah, Crime Wave, wherever it is, it's probably out there on YouTube, but it's great fun.
Yeah, I think that's what I saw it on, to be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Bruce in the 80s as well. I think you watched this recently, or you mentioned it recently, but a movie I always quite liked, which again hasn't really had a kind of second life on Blu-ray or anything, is Sundown, the Vampire in Retreat.
Yeah. I have a couple of issues with that one though. As lovely as Bruce is and stuff, he's kind of not really. The if he wasn't in it, the film wouldn't have been any different.
Yeah.
Do you think that his character is kind of a bit of a non-character? He's this kind of geeky little comical Van Helsing type character with a bunch of vampires that are trying to be. They're trying to be more human, aren't they, or not attack humans?
Yeah, they're trying to reform. Yeah,
and they're battling against another group of vampires who are like, no, we want to still like kill people. But then Van Helsing turns up and pretty much subsequently gets turned into a vampire.
Yeah,
it is one of those. Do a very good job.
Yeah, it's a bit overcrowded, isn't it? Because it's got a lot of different characters, and he's one of them. I also thought it was quite fun. It is a bit of a mess, though. I would agree.
Yeah,
it's underserved, perhaps. I don't quite know how it happened. Maybe it was like a cameo that was beefed up, or maybe it was a bigger role that got smaller. I'm not quite sure with Bruce. Although he gets to wear like the old tweed jacket and with the elbow patches and the kind of goofy bow tie, and
he definitely makes the movie for me. It's lovely to see.
Yeah. And it does carry over with the other stuff. So in this he's pretty useless with women, and he does laugh at his own jokes. I think there's a pun about veins, or in vein, in the vein.
Yeah.
So it's still in line with that ridiculous Bruce, although he just doesn't get enough time to shine, as you suggest. It's a bit of a shame, but we have to take what we can get,
Absolutely. And then he does his little pop up right at the end of Intruder.
Yeah, Intruder's great. Did you enjoy Intruder?
Yes, I really loved that. Not being a massive fan of slashers, I actually
Yeah.
really enjoyed this one. And I was expecting it to be more Bruce. I wasn't expecting him to literally
Ah,
just show up right at the end. But it has so many other people. It has Sam Raimi and Ted Raimi in it quite a lot, doesn't it? So,
it's really
okay.
gruesome deaths.
The downside, yeah, absolutely. The downside is you don't get to see Bruce much, but you get to see Sam and Ted, and I really love them too, and they're great. And Ted as Joe, or is it Produce Joe, as they call him? He's actually credited that. It's just listening to the same tune over and over again.
It's
It's
a
horrible,
generic use.
horrible tune. Yeah,
It is funny, isn't it? I love the killer in Intruder. He's hilarious. You're walking down the
yeah,
street with
he's
a head in
great.
each hand,
Yeah, eating a burger.
eating a burger. That's it, isn't it? Burger
Oh,
in one hand, a head in the
yeah,
other. That's it.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, he's so over the top, and he's the guy from Evil Dead 2, isn't he? He's the
yeah. Danny Hicks.
yeah, Danny. Yeah.
He's what is he?
Oh, he's
Oh,
the
I've
kind
got
of
his
hillbilly
notes
in
on.
Evil Dead 2.
He is. Yeah,
He's great. It's kind of like the whole gang is here, isn't it? Intruder. We're all back, and
yeah. It has a
Sam's
little
there.
cameo with Greg Nicotero in it as well, apparently,
Oh,
which
I'd
I
forgotten
totally
about that.
missed. I totally
Ah,
missed it. I didn't recognize him. I didn't notice him, and at the end, it went, "Oh, Greg Nicotero, Townie and Carr." I was like, "Oh, I missed that.
Townie.
Sorry."
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I really enjoyed that. That was a great one. It's a bit of a slow start, but
yeah, yeah.
as it
Once it's
goes on,
going,
it gets better. As you say, some really gruesome and great kills. Even
yeah.
Sam's kill is probably the most gruesome, getting hooked on a meat hook
That's
in a
right.
rather
Yeah,
nasty way.
the makeup's great, isn't it? And is it Ted that gets his head cleaved in half with the thing, the saw,
Yeah,
or is that? Yeah,
I believe so.
that's a really memorable kill. They were really heavily censored when we first watched it on video, but then gradually you got to see like the uncut versions and stuff, and you realise, wow, this is a different film. They've put that back in.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
oh, nice. Yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, Bruce literally just turns up at the end to arrest some people, and then he's gone.
yeah. So another cop role, but not as beefy as Maniac Cop.
No, definitely not.
Um, he does play a good cop, so he has all sorts of directions he could have gone in, but yeah, it's nice range of roles, isn't it? Really.
And he does another tiny little pop up in Darkman as well, doesn't he? Right at the end.
Yes, yeah. Darkman's great. The final kind of what do you call it? Incarnation of um, the character, isn't it? Like
Oh, what's his name? Liam Neeson's
Liam
character.
Neeson. Yeah, his
Yeah.
character name's got a great name, hasn't he? Isn't his character called something like Peyton? Not
Oh, oh
Peyton.
yes, that is. Yeah, Peyton.
West
Oh, I'm gonna have to look it
Lake.
up. Westlake. Yeah,
Westlake. Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
It's
Yeah,
one of
we
those
got there in
only
the
in the
end.
movies names.
Yeah, names that doesn't stick and you never hear anywhere else. Yeah, Peyton
Yeah,
Westlake, definitely.
I like that
That is
name.
him.
I always liked the name of this is totally off topic, of course, but I always liked the name of Tom Cruise's character in Days of Thunder, which is Cole Trickle. What?
That's the
Really?
names they come up with. We're sticking with that one. Okay.
It must have been a meeting about it. No, no, I insist. Stubborn screenwriter. Um,
That's what he actually wanted to call his kid, but his wife wouldn't let him.
yeah, fantastic. Yeah. No, Darkman's really fun actually, and Darkman again. It doesn't get talked about enough. I don't know what happens to these things. I guess
No.
it was the first big studio film for Sam Raimi, a Universal movie that I suppose was ahead
Yeah.
of its time in terms of being a kind of superhero movie.
Yeah, because it
Um,
wasn't a well-known one. It wasn't one that people knew about, and it wasn't anyone that had any specific superpowers as such. It's like the first one of
no,
those type things.
it's cool, isn't it? Because it's like a bit of Phantom of the Opera, a bit of
Mm.
one of the Marvel characters, I guess. And it's quite interesting, I think that, and he wouldn't have been known at the time, certainly in America, but interesting that Liam Neeson has that role. And obviously, in kind of older age, he became a real kind of kick you in the face action hero with the
Yeah,
Taken movies.
yeah, it's kind of strange. He does seem a little bit slightly disjointed as that character. Maybe Bruce should have gone for that.
Yeah, the
Bruce would
the
have been
Dark Man that would
Darkman.
have
That would have been
been.
awesome.
I'm guessing though, maybe that's probably his first big studio movie for Sam, but possibly Bruce was groomed for that role and they wouldn't let him be the role. They had to get somebody else. I don't know.
Yeah, probably. Usually the way, isn't it? But yeah,
Yeah,
after kind of like late 80s early 90s, Bruce, he does his kind of little bit parts here, there, and everywhere, but then he starts kind of coming back, doesn't he? Oh, I don't know if we ever asked you if you have you watched Mind Warp? Did you ever see that one?
No, I
Also,
don't
also
think
known
so.
as Brain Slasher.
Yeah, I'm sure I never watched it. I think I remember reading about it in Fangoria. But
Yeah.
is he got a central role in that?
It's pretty much he's not one of the main characters, but he's in it quite a lot. It's quite a good kind of sci-fi, not really horror as such, but kind of sci-fi fantasy type movie. It's got Angus Scrimm in it as well as one of the bad
Yes.
guys, and yeah, it's set in the future, in like a post-apocalyptic world where most of the human race are plugged into virtual reality machines, basically. And one of the girls in the machines kind of rebels. She doesn't want to live that life anymore. She wants to see what it's like on the outside. So she gets kicked out into the post-apocalyptic world where she first meets Bruce. He's kind of the only human alive that isn't a mutated cannibalistic underground liver type thing. He still lives on the surface and kind of takes her in, but they end up getting kidnapped by the cannibals. They discover that her father is now the leader of these cannibals, and there's a big old battle against them to try to get back out, and she wants to take him back to live with her back at the virtual reality machine. She's like, okay, yeah, I'm just going to go back now. But
Ah,
but Bruce, yeah, he's quite a big part in there because he's kind of plays the hero. He gets kidnapped along with her and gets beaten up and put in a mine and eaten by leeches and all sorts of stuff like that.
whoa.
He is a good character. He kind of goes a bit twisted and weird at the end. Yeah, I thought that was quite a good one for him.
That does sound fun. I remember being aware of it, but I just never watched it. There was that, and I'm pretty sure, was it Lunatic's A Love Story? I don't think I've seen that either.
No, I've not
Um,
seen that one.
I did see The Man with a Screaming Brain, but I can't remember much about it.
Ah, yes. I need to talk about that one as well. I watched that again recently. That's one I only watched the once. I was like, I have to watch it again. That was a movie that Bruce actually wrote himself. He wrote it and directed it.
Yes.
He brought it out as a graphic novel to start off
Oh,
with,
well.
which he then adapted into a script and directed it himself. He had to go. I think they went over to Bulgaria to do it. So this was in 2005.
Hmm.
He also did this alongside Alien Apocalypse. Did you watch that one?
Yes. Again, I don't remember much about it, but yes, I have
Oh,
seen that too. That's a
unfortunately,
bit dodgy, isn't
yeah,
it?
it's not good. Yeah, Alien Apocalypse is really, really quite bad. For it being a film that came out in 2005, it's ridiculously awful.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not even B grade movie. It's like way down in the alphabet on that kind of
Yeah.
thing. That was not directed by Bruce. That was directed by Josh Becker, who I believe is part of their little friendship group.
Yes, his
But
name crops up like Scott Spiegel, doesn't it?
yeah,
There's a whole bunch of them. Yeah.
hmm yeah, no, it doesn't end up all that well. Bruce is one of the main characters. He plays a astronaut doctor that gets he gets put into stasis after a space mission, and him and his assistant, who's a very pretty lady, land on back on Earth, and it's been taken over by aliens, which just basically look like giant grasshoppers. And yeah, he has to kind of like lead a revolution to free the human race from the giant grasshoppers. But yeah, that's not very good. The dialogue, even for Bruce, is actually quite cringy. He does make it a lot better, but it's
Yeah.
definitely not one of his better ones. But yeah, that was made alongside Man with the Screaming Brain, which were both shot in Bulgaria. Man with a Screaming Brain is more of a sci-fi thing than a horror thing, but it's also quite comical. If you can remember much about it, it's about Bruce plays a wealthy businessman who travels to Bulgaria with his wife for business and end up in a taxi in the middle of Gypsy Town, and they kind of get eyeballed by this evil gypsy lady who then turns up at the hotel and tries to seduce Bruce's character, which is William, and the taxi driver seduces Bruce's wife. So they have a like hidden relationship, the taxi driver and the gypsy lady, and she gets all jealous and she basically kills both of them. And there's a little side story going on about a doctor and helper Pavel, who's played by Ted Raimi, and he's just hilarious throughout this movie. He has the best accent ever. They kind of like splice Bruce's character and the taxi driver together. They kind of like stitch both the brains together and put them back in Bruce's head. So he kind of has a battle going on in his head of him and this taxi driver trying to stop the gypsy lady, who also goes and kills his wife. And they end up, the doctor and Pavel end up putting her brain in probably the most 80s robot you've ever seen. And it all just becomes just quite a hilarious kind of battle where everyone ends up going after this gypsy lady to kind of destroy her and try and get their lives back to normal, but you don't quite know how that's going to happen considering two brains and the woman's in a robot.
Yeah, I do remember that. That's really in the kind of zany category. Like there's a lot of physical comedy, isn't there, for him, which he's very good at.
Very much. It's great watching him because he's not a very handsome character in this. Obviously, he's still Bruce, so obviously, he's still Bruce. You still love him, but he has this hideous like scar across the front of his head, and he just looks like wrong in all the suits and stuff he wears. But there's a really great scene of him chasing after the gypsy lady on a little pink Vespa with a little ribbons on the handlebars and everything, and flashing his head down a toilet and that kind of stuff. But I have to admit, the best character in that is Ted Raimi's character of Pavel. He's hilarious. I absolutely love him in that. He's great.
Ted is great, isn't he? Ted's really underrated and possibly deserves more kind of prominent roles. But yeah, I always look forward to Ted in a movie. He's in the most random stuff, usually getting killed, like even Midnight Meat Train.
Yeah.
He gets horribly murdered in that, but you just really look forward to seeing him. And he's in Candyman. He just turns up in so many things, doesn't he?
He does. Yeah, he's great. Second to Bruce, I think. He's very cute.
He's lovely, isn't he? Yeah.
So yeah, he went and did 2 films in 1 year then in 2005. And then before that he'd done Bubba Hotep. That was 2002. Bubba Hotep. But that was a really cool role for Bruce because it doesn't really concern any of the other guys from their little group, does it? It's just Bruce.
Yeah, absolutely. And it always seemed to me to be a really risky one. Like it treads a tricky line, I think, because it could have easily been like a kind of Elvis caricature because we're so used to Elvis impersonators, but he turned it into such a lovely, heartfelt role where it's very funny.
Oh yeah.
But before our eyes, like Bruce became this old man who could conceivably be an old Elvis,
Yeah.
It's such a great source material. Joe Lansdale, if you haven't read Joe Lansdale, he's a great writer, and but it's a tricky thing to pull off in a film, so to speak.
Does it go along with the story?
Is
it kind of how you would imagine it?
Okay. It's quite faithful, yeah. From what I remember, it's about as faithful as it could be in a releasable film. A lot of the humor is there, like the detail of the man who might be Elvis calling the tumor on his cock Priscilla after his ex-wife. But also the movie, and it's yeah, you're right, it was out of his normal circle. It was with Don Coscarelli, who we all know for loads of Phantasm films, but a talented guy. Those movies a lot of them are really clever. But even this was a big risk for him, I think, because it's quite tender, really. There's a ancient mummy involved, but so much of it is about old age and and about regrets and about the man who might be Elvis looking back and thinking, well, my life was food and sex and not much else, and I don't see my children, and all these sad things, and it's beautifully done. I love Bubba Hotep. I think it's not just a great movie in its own kind of genre, but it's one of the great kind of movies generally of that period. And he's so good. I think if anybody just reduced Bruce to the admittedly great Ash stuff, they need to watch this one because it's actually pretty subtle once you get past all the kind of cruder humor, or the stuff where he's leching over the nurses and stuff. There's actually,
and he does a really good Elvis impression as well.
Yeah, he's
literally
awesome
just
Yeah.
He's just like, oh my god, that is him. And obviously, like, I never fancied Elvis at all, but I kind of do as Bruce as Elvis. even
Yeah,
as an old man. Is that just
absolutely,
me?
absolutely. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, he captures that because Elvis. Yeah, absolutely. And it's about that, and it's about old age, and it's just such a great film. Yeah, Bubba Hotep. It's also got a beautiful soundtrack as well, which I was so in awe of Bubba Hotep. I remember I spent quite a large sum of money just getting a signed soundtrack because I think it was for some
Oh
reason it was
wow.
online somewhere,
Mm.
and I still got that. I didn't keep a lot of stuff, but of the CDs these days, but that is prized possession. That's
Mm.
yeah, Bubba Hotep. I was always disappointed. You might know more than me, but I was always disappointed as the long kind of planned Bubba and Nosferatu or something like that never got made, right? Or it was going to be.
No, I didn't hear about that, but I know that there hasn't been anything of that. It kind of ended quite finally, really, didn't it? I don't think you could follow it up with anything.
It's a lovely ending. Yeah, it really is. It's a shame. Maybe they should have worked together again.
Mm.
Coscarelli or Lansdale's done a lot of different stuff, and Bruce is probably a good actor to be in a couple of his other kind of uh, things that also blend horror and tragedy and a kind of coarse streak of humor, which I think works so well in the care home stuff in Bubba Hotep.
Mm.
Just brilliant, man.
And even though it did come out in 2002,
Oh, it
you know,
doesn't feel that long ago.
no, it really doesn't feel like that long ago. It doesn't look like it's aged at all. Yet you've got, a few years later, 2005, when he does Alien Apocalypse.
Yeah,
That really does look bad in comparison.
yeah, yeah.
But
That's a
yeah,
shame. It's quite sweet in a way that he's carried on doing the really tiny budget stuff that he's obviously better than something like Alien Apocalypse, but well, whatever it is, it's obviously part
he's
of its
still
loyalty.
yeah,
Isn't
he's
it?
still going to give it his all. He's still going to do it, and be proud of it. He's never said this movie is rubbish.
Yeah, that's cool actually, isn't it? You never get that sense, do you, from him? He's he's obviously a great guy with fans and stuff, but you don't get that sense that he's ever regretted being typed for these certain kinds of roles. And he's had different things on TV. Not all of them have panned out successfully.
No.
Like what was the Briscoe County?
Yeah, The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. was only ran from. Hang on, I've got it written down somewhere. Only ran for about a year, 93 to 94.
Yeah.
But there are rumours that is coming back.
Wow. Yeah.
I think Bruce has started that rumour himself. There's all sorts of things he keeps going on about. But yeah,
Uh,
that's apparently possibly getting a revamp.
yeah. Because that was a big show, wasn't it? That kind of failed. I suppose any other time it might have caught on. TV is such about timing and luck, isn't it? A lot of the time.
Yeah. Did
Um,
you ever see any of Briscoe County
no, I
Jr.?
was aware of it because it was for some reason I associated it with X Files. I was a huge X Files fan. I think maybe it possibly was showing in the same time slot as X Files, and X Files was doing much better. Maybe that's why I
Mm.
associate it with that. Certainly around the same time that X Files was kicking off. Um,
I
but I love
tried
the
to
idea of it.
watch. Yeah, I tried to watch a couple of episodes of it, and I did find it actually quite cheesy. I wasn't all
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
thrilled with it. But I'm hoping a remake would. It just had a lot of cheesy lines. I think he says the same line over and over again quite a lot, which gets a little bit boring. So
Ah,
hopefully they've kind of like toned that down a bit
yeah,
and thought about it a little bit more.
yeah. That's, any other key appearances, Sarah, for Bruce that we've missed?
Oh, have you ever seen My Name is Bruce? Another one
Oh,
of his
hang on a minute.
films.
Yes, I have seen that. Yeah, yeah. That's did he direct that one as well, or was that just
He
him?
did. Yeah, no, he directed that, and then I think most of the set and stuff was at his house. He wrote
That's right.
about it in quite a lot in one of his books. But yeah, My Name is Bruce is actually quite fun. It goes along the lines of his kind of Ash character. Um, some people or a young kid awakes a Chinese kind of demon and thinks, I know, I'll get Ash Williams to come and save the day. So he calls up Bruce, thinking Bruce is basically Ash, which he's not. In this instance, he's like a bit of a wimp, bit cocky, bit up
Hmm.
himself, thinking he's a great actor and stuff. And he goes to this town thinking they just want him as an actor. He's going to appear in a film or something, when it actually turns out to be real. So it's just a big spoof of him, of his life. It's a spoof of a spoof of him, really. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, he still kills the demon and saves the day. And it's a very, very fun film. And it has a great cast in it as well. Once again, it has Ted Raimi in it as his agent who couldn't give a shit about Bruce at all. And Ellen Sandweiss actually plays his ex-wife, who they call Cheryl.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
it does. It has a lot of nods to Evil Dead and little in jokes and stuff like that, and a lot of poking fun at Bruce himself. But
Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was a really good one. I enjoyed Man with a Screaming Brain, but I think My Name Is Bruce is possibly slightly a little bit better. But that came out a couple of years later, so he probably learned a few lessons and did a few things differently.
Yeah. Yeah, I have quite good memories of it as well. There's a few like stars that have done similar things, like Jean-Claude Van Damme did JCVD, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Which was almost painfully like autobiographical. And I think Nicolas Cage is playing himself in something that's coming up, I'm sure. And that should be
Amazing.
mental.
That will be mental.
Yeah, and I suppose the Bruce one fits in with his kind of general self-deprecating screen persona and everything, doesn't it? In Evil Dead
Mm-hmm.
and everything. So that's quite cool. I really liked. I don't know if you ever caught up with it in the end, but I did like The Woods, which was, I don't know when it was made, I've forgotten, but
Yeah, no, I didn't see that in the end. I did look it
that's
up.
interesting. Yeah, that's a Lucky McKee film, and all Lucky McKee
Mm.
films are worth a look. You know, he's a mad talent. But yeah, The Woods is like this weird Suspiria-ish 60 set thing set in this kind of very strict, oppressive school, and it's quite fun because again, it's got a very kind of nudge, nudge, wink, wink, Bruce nod because it's basically about a possessed woodland.
Right.
And the voice of the woods effectively is by Angela Bettis, who's obviously she's Lucky McKee's muse. She's in everything that he does. But Bruce is actually really understated, so it's closer to something like his role in X-Files, maybe a bit closer to certain parts of Bubba Hotep because he's underplaying it, and he's like the downtrodden dad. He's kind of henpecked by his wife, and he's the dad of the heroine. And it's just quite a nice example, I suppose, of Bruce playing someone that isn't larger than life, but someone that's just a bit ordinary. And
Mm.
I think that's another nice kind of contrast to what we think of straight away when we think of Bruce. But The Woods is a nice little movie. It was a studio movie that got buried, and I think it ended up on the usual streaming things, but it's out there somewhere. It's worth a look, I would say.
Oh, check that one out.
Yeah,
And yeah, that is the thing with him. He, as you say, he's just done so many little bits of everything. He's kind of always about, which is always good. He's
yeah.
kind of like nowadays he's kind of more of a host of things. He hosts a kind of quiz show type thing at Comic
Ah,
Cons
cool.
called Last Fan Standing, which you can see quite a lot of them up on YouTube and stuff.
Yeah.
And he also does he did the recent Ripley's Believe It or Not as well, hosted those shows as well over in the States. I don't know if we can see it over here,
Ah,
but it's
stitched
good.
up Brits again.
Yeah, but it's good that he kind of does those little bits. And he also did you know he also did a little short movie? One of his first movies that he actually directed was a little short film called Finalysis.
Ah,
You can see that on YouTube as well. It's about following fandom and stuff, and he's a little bit kind of his My Name Is Bruce character in this, but it's not necessarily just about him. He'll go on about some fans, but it's like him being a fan of other people. It also has Ted Raimi in it, of course, saying who we used to send fan mail to and stuff like that. But a lot of it's about it features a lot of like cosplayers,
oh,
Xena
cool.
cosplayers and stuff like that. It's only like about half an hour long, but that's a cool little Bruce thing to check out.
Nice. And it's worth noting that like the commentaries where he's joined by Sam and whoever else, they're quite fun, aren't they? On the
Yeah,
Evil Dead films,
yeah.
they're hilarious together. I guess some of those are quite old now, but they tend to be used on all of the new re-releases and stuff, so they're always good value. Um, just he's a good guy to appear on movies about movies. Sorry, documentaries about movies, isn't he? Like
Mm.
horror movie documentaries. he would have been a great presence if they'd have got him for the 80s one we mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. I don't even know why they didn't get any of them on there. Would have been good.
That's
But
strange. Yeah.
he does pop on quite a lot of them, doesn't he? He was in the recent, was it the Eli Roth little
Oh yeah,
documentaries that they did?
that
He
had a
was
good
in that.
lineup of people. Yeah, he was part of that. Yeah, the History of Horror, Eli Roth. Yeah,
That's it. Yeah, he was
yeah.
in that quite a lot. He's also written quite a few books. I say quite a few, possibly two main ones. Was the If Chins Could Kill, Confessions of a B-movie Actor, came out in 2001. Just kind of documenting his like early career and quite a lot of the Evil Dead stuff. I think you lent me that one first.
Yeah, that's really good fun, isn't it? Yeah, it's the first one I read, and it's a really nice insight into that period.
And then the next one, well, in the series, I would say it was a series. He then brings out Hail to the Chin, Further Confessions of a B movie Actor, but that wasn't until 2017, only a couple of years ago. So he kind of like finishes off the story, you know, what happened to him after Evil Dead and all this stuff about him directing My Name is Bruce and stuff like that. And I've also got heard rumours here that they are actually going to be re-releasing it
Oh,
with an updated version called Requiem for Ash, featuring some new stories and stuff. So that's one of the little rumours that he's been circulating.
oh.
So I will definitely be getting that. But have you ever read his other books, his fictional books?
No, I'm aware of them, but I've never read them.
You not read Make Love the Bruce Campbell Way?
No, no, I haven't. No.
It's a great little book. I'll have to lend it to you. They should make a film out of that, actually. That would work quite well, but they'd have to get Richard Gere and Renee Zellweger on board.
Oh, I like Richard Gere. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
wonder if
thought
we can
that'd be
get
up your
him.
street.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, massive
Yeah.
Richard Gere fan. That little thing he does with his head tilt. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of another, it's a fictional story about a Bruce life, written in a really, really humorous way and with a like massive car crash ending. Huge fight scenes and everything at the end. He's actually done an audio book version of it as well, which I really, really must get.
Oh man, yeah. That sounds awesome, and that kind of sums him up, doesn't it? Quite nicely. That kind of version of himself that he portrays in that.
Yeah, too right. I'm trying
Nice.
to think of other rumours that he's been circulating. Oh, speaking of follow-ups to movies and stuff, he's been talking about possibly making a follow-up to My Name is Bruce.
Ah.
Not sure how true this is or how much fun he's having with this, but he wants to call it. It's going to be called Bruce versus Frankenstein. And he wants to make it like the Expendables of horror. He's saying he's approaching like Kane Hodder and Robert Englund and stuff like that to all be in it. So I don't know if it's actually a serious thing, but it would be great if it
Well,
was.
that would be something, wouldn't it? Those guys, I think, like Robert England especially, yeah, and Kane, I suppose as well. They deserve some kind of Expendables-ish send-off, really, don't they?
Yeah,
Doesn't even have to be a send-off, just some ensemble piece that actually works and isn't just a waste of their talent. Because they do get stitched. You know, we Tony Todd, you mentioned. You know, he turns up in things. He's always good, but he turns up in things that are not as good as he is.
yeah,
Um, yeah, that would be great. I would like to see that actually.
yeah. Let's hope that happens.
I, you never know.
Mm,
Well, any other Bruce things before we go back into the night, Sarah?
I think that's about it, really. Just that he's just a very lovely person, and I've been very lucky to meet him. I remember waiting in the queue at Walker Stalker in 2018 for probably about 2 hours, clasping my copy of Hail to the Chin and like seriously debating whether I should be doing this or not. Because I was waiting for ages, and the closer I was getting so nervous.
Yeah.
Actually waiting there, but then as soon as they show you up to him, he literally just kind of looks at you, grabs you by the hand, shakes your hand, says hi, what do you do, you
Oh.
know, asks you about you, and you just kind of just stand there and go, oh, sign my book, just ask you your name. It's like, I don't know what to say to you, but I love you. And then you just kind of run off and you're like, oh my God, that was the best part, you know, best moment of my life. Like 5 minutes of my life. It was
Oh.
great. He's just so lovely. It's just nice to know that you know, your heroes are who you hope they are.
Yeah, yeah, that's priceless, isn't it? That's worth however many hours and whatever the cost of anything, you know, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah,
You can say
yeah,
that.
yeah. I went for Walker Stalker for Walking Dead. Didn't actually do any Walking Dead stuff. Just basically stood in a queue for Bruce, did some shopping, and went home. And went. That was the best day ever.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that completes the circle because it's these movies we have loads of affection for these things and his character, but to know that he's a decent guy and these events especially is great, isn't it?
Oh, he's just
Wunderbar.
lovely. Just love him so much. It's
We
been
do
fun
love
talking
Bruce.
about him.
Yeah, he's top notch, isn't he? Well, I'm sure we'll bring him back into another episode at some point, perhaps when he does get that
Absolutely.
Expendables of horror made, hopefully.
Yes.
Oh,
We'll
bless
keep you
him.
posted.
Hey, how old is he? Because I have forgotten. Is he about 60-ish now?
He is exactly 62 now. He was born on the
62.
22nd of June, 1958.
It's weird, isn't it? Because I was thinking
It's
just
on my
before the
calendar.
show, like Evil Dead is 40-ish, almost 40 years old. That's crazy.
God.
Still feels like such a youngster.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Oh,
he's
getting
aged
on.
well.
He's aged really well,
He's
actually.
very, very well. Still love him.
Yeah, and that's the part of what makes the series work is that beneath all the corniness and what a lech he is, he's a handsome older man now, and you can see how he can lure anybody in, especially vulnerables like me.
And me.
Yes, yeah, both in the category. See you in the queue.
Yeah.
Um, Wonderbar. Well, that was extraordinarily the Bruce Campbell Evil Dead special, and it was a good one, wasn't it, Sarah? It was lovely to chinwag about the greats.
Absolutely. I could talk about him for hours and just reminisce and think about Evil Dead and all sorts. You know, where would
Yeah,
we be without them?
exactly, and
The world would be a worse place without them, wouldn't it?
it
And
sure would.
if nobody, you know, if you take anything from this and you haven't watched Evil Ash versus Evil Dead, please, please, please go watch all 3 seasons of Ash versus Evil Dead. You won't regret it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at least one of them's on Netflix, right? At least in the UK.
I think they've all been on at some point, and hopefully they will
Ah,
return again.
I think it does deserve to be better known than it probably is beyond like the obvious groups like us.
Mm,
But hopefully something like Netflix will get it out there and then, like you said, lead people to the movies or lead them back to the
yeah,
movies.
exactly.
Um, Same
Or
for
just
Bubba
buy the
Hotep.
DVDs. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that needs to be out there more.
yeah, that's something that I think. I mean, it is a cult movie, I guess, but that may have a second life when it gets shown somewhere and more people
Mm,
find it after what again it's been a few years now.
mm.
But yeah, hopefully this episode has given you some nice recommends or just a nice desire to go back and revisit the treasure trove of Bruce's career.
Oh
Um,
yes.
yeah. Next episode is something completely different, though. And we're also going to be welcoming in with open legs a new co host next month, which is a young chap called Matt Blissett, who is a writer in the similar sort of area where we live, Sarah, Norfolk, England.
Oh,
He's one
fabulous.
of us. He's got the
One
same
of
number of
us.
toes. Yeah.
The same
And
lovely accent.
yes, yeah.
Wow.
Almost as nice as ours, not quite, of course. And he'll be popping along to have a bit of wagging of the chin about Stephen King on an episode going live on the 25th of September 2020. And that could be quite interesting and possibly quite a lengthy chat, I would think, because
I
Stephen King's
feel
done
it
a fair
might.
bit.
Just a few. Just a few things.
So
But
we'll
he's
be, yeah. We'll be gallivanting around the various Stephen King movies. It's fair to say Matt's a big fan of Stephen King's books, as am I. So we'll be drifting through some of those and the ways in which they've been adapted, and all bunch of other Stephen King stuff. Whatever you like, really. If you like Stephen King, next episode number 12. A whole year of horror
holy
streams. Yeah, can you believe it?
wow. It's gone quick, hasn't it?
Yeah,
It's been fun.
we've evolved. The first episode was done on a couple of bits of tin tied together. Um, Now it's all sophisticated with computers when we're dressed in these episodes these days as well. So
Absolutely, yeah.
we've come a long way. But yeah, do join us for the next episode with our special guest star Matt Blissett and the return of Sarah and
Yes.
anybody else that we can find on the street that likes Stephen King will all be joining in. But in the meantime, obviously, stay safe, have a good time, go and watch Bubba Hotep and Evil Dead 2 again. And it's good night from me.
And good night from me. Have a good one.
Bye, folks. Take care.